Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення великої страни. Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пихцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Platforms such as UA Weapons and JomanyW on Twitter and the Enforcer channel allowed people around the world to follow the war in a depth and a way that had never happened before. Retired General David Petraeus.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 710 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And a massive strike is crippling Russia, and also the U.S. is still attacking those Houthis down in Yemen, and it's been a big day. And welcome back.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and also the ongoing rising tensions that are still underway in the Middle East as of tonight. There have been massive developments in both, but the major one today was a huge and crippling strike to the Russians' ability to produce oil, one of the most important assets that the Russian Federation has going for it economically and also militarily. We have a lot of news to cover tonight in Ukraine, not just inside of Russia, but from the front lines of Ukraine as well. And not only that, a little bit later on in the stream, we'll once again be going over all of the developments over the past 24 hours that are going on inside the Middle East, and also telling you all about all of those down there as well. But before we do, I do have to quickly say this. We have seen, I think, 1 or 2 viewers who have said that they have tried to super chat and they cannot. If that is the case, which we would not understand why that is the case, but if that is the case, then just throw your question in as a live chat and we'll try and get it that way. If you do want to support the channel and you're not able to throw in a super chat for some reason, there is always Patreon, which there's a link for in the description below, which will take you over there. But moving on from that and into our major news of the night, this takes us to the city of Volgograd. Volgograd is one of the largest cities within the Russian Federation and also one of the most important. Formerly called the city of Stalingrad, it was, of course, one of the largest and deadliest battlefield of the Second World War. Nowadays, it is more so just a normal Russian city down here in the southern part, the southwestern part of the Russian Federation, but it appears that a major oil refinery, and I believe this is it right here. This is the massive oil refinery that we're speaking of, the Lukoil Volgograd, was stricken today by a Ukrainian drone attack. Apparently, multiple drones struck the refinery and ended up causing severe and crippling damage to the Russian oil infrastructure in this area. I'm actually going to be moving these.
You said Lukoil was the company?
Yeah, Lukoil. It's kind of like lukewarm.
Oh yeah, you remember when the Lukoil CEO actually slipped off his yacht, banged his head, I think fell over a tree, fell down a mountain, and then somehow drowned in the ocean.
I remember that. That wasn't that long ago either. And speaking of which, I would tell you this, Matthew, that refinery today also did the exact same thing, because this oil refinery was wildly on fire. I mean, the flames were engulfing a large part of the refinery, which we can see here as someone's driving by. And we see the fire raging on one of the major facilities within the oil refinery. And that's the end of that clip, but nevertheless, once again showing that there has been an attack, no doubt about it, on this refinery, the Lukoil oil refinery in Volgograd. We also got to see some pictures from the fire brigade in Volgograd. If y'all know HBO's miniseries Chernobyl, you will know that the fire brigade is always the group to respond first to the scene at a major incident. And this certainly was a major incident, no doubt. Just seeing some of the pictures, we can see clearly now that the smoke is not gone and the oil refinery has been embroiled in flames and fire. We also got to see that apparently it was this specific part of the refinery that got hit pretty heavily. And when we go to Google Maps, we can locate that part of the refinery to be exactly right there. Pretty much the dead center of the refinery's main processing areas. Once again showing that this was a very deliberate and well thought out attack by the Ukrainian drones that then hit this area and have knocked this entire refinery offline. Moving on into our last video clip from the refinery, we also got to see the explosion in another clip. And this is actually the security camera footage of the drone hitting the refinery. So here it is. We can see the security camera looking off into the distance, and now we can see the bright flash and explosion of a Ukrainian drone hitting dead onto its target in the dense center of the refinery and spewing out massive flames, as the refinery will then catch on fire like we saw a little later and knock the entire refinery offline.
That scene right there looked almost exactly like that scene out of that Chernobyl miniseries on HBO, where they looked out the window of that apartment and were like, "What's that bright light in the distance?" And something was like exploding. And it was a Chernobyl reactor. It's like identical looking.
You know, Matthew, I'm not going to lie. I was actually going to say that once the clip ended. I was going to be like, y'all know, that looks a lot like Chernobyl. Look at that. I mean, that's
a big boom.
Yeah, that was
I don't know if it shattered the windows like the miniseries too.
You did not see graphite. Yeah, but nevertheless, really nice to see that they were able to once again target and hit a major oil facility of the Russian Federation. Now, many of y'all who are incredibly attentive will realize that this is starting to become a very common trend. We saw that a small, and when I mean small, I really mean it was a smaller oil refinery getting hit within the middle of St. Petersburg, and I'll show y'all exactly where that was. It was right down here. We got to see this tiny little oil refinery getting hit. We also saw that over at the port of Ust-Luga in the northern area of Russia, this was also hit and serious damage was caused as well. And moving on from that, we've also seen other major oil facilities, especially near the border areas of Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod, and Voronezh, along with Rostov-on-Don and Krasnodar, also getting hit as well to very high numbers. Consistently at this point, it appears that the Ukrainians are going for oil storage and oil production facilities within Russia. And this is something that is very interesting because today a map was published about Russia's oil refinery sites, locations, and other kinds of major oil infrastructure within the Russian Federation. And from what we're seeing, all of the oil refineries, almost every single one of them, is, from what we understand, within striking distance of Ukrainian drones at this point. Every single one of them is, for the most part. And of course, this little graph here is in Russian, but if we move over here, we can actually see the English translation. And it tells us what companies run what refineries, and not only that, it also gives us the size and processing capacity of millions of tons. So your two largest circles on the map are oil refineries that can process anywhere in between 10 million tons or more than that, all the way up to 15 million and beyond. When we look at this map here, the first one, and we take a look at the Volgograd facility, it is one of the largest. The one up in, there is one up near St. Petersburg, not the one that was hit in the center of the city, but there is one, and it is one of the largest in the Russian Federation. But the one down in Volgograd is able to process around 10 million tons of oil. That is one of the largest oil refineries in the western area of Russia, and of course the western area of Russia has most, if not all, of the oil refineries already, meaning that the Ukrainians are going after these oil refineries for a strict purpose and a reason. They are going after Russia's ability to produce fuel for the armed forces, and of course for their economy as a whole. As the Russians continue to lose their ability to actually produce anything meaningful out of the oil that they're extracting from Russia, that means that there is less available fuel for their economy to operate off of, for example, their railroads, their trucks, and their ships. But not only that, most importantly, it's a lot less fuel for their armed forces to operate off of, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army that's currently inside of Ukraine. And as these oil refineries continue to get hit, the Russians will continue to have to rely on oil silos that have been kept pretty much for decades at this point, all the way through the Soviet Union's history and up until the present day, to try and keep the Russians running. But of course, that is a finite supply. Once the oil reserves run out, the Russians are having to tap into literally what they produce on that day. And if they cannot produce enough on a single day from their oil refineries to be able to keep everything running, something has to go. Either the Russian economy slows to a grinding halt, a lot like the oil crisis of the 70s here in the West, or they grind their armed forces to a complete halt as far as the armored vehicles go, and they try and keep the economy alive. We actually don't know which one the Russians would really pick in the end, whether they would pick trying to keep their economy afloat and alive, which may actually end up prolonging the war, or whether they would sit there and idly stand by and just let the economy die while their armed forces were prioritized for the fuel. We don't know which.
Oh, second one, hands down, like bar none, they'll go with the second option. Like I'm 99% sure of that.
Really? You're 99%
yeah.
sure?
Yeah, they've thrown all logic to the wayside at this point. Like, it made no sense originally to invade Ukraine, and every action that Putin's taken since then has been prioritizing invading that country for no real reason, just to, I guess, settle a personal vendetta that he has with somebody in Ukraine. I don't know why, but they haven't prioritized their own people whatsoever. They give the families of the fallen soldiers like ladas and theme park tickets. Like, they don't care about the people. That's clear.
Maybe so, and it is also true that Gazprom does have mercenary units. And funnily enough, Gazprom, which is one of the major Russian oil companies that runs a lot of these refineries, they actually have two mercenary groups called Torch and Flame. We very rarely ever hear about them because they're usually in reserve line areas. They're not on the front itself. They're kind of kept in reserve. But they did have a run-in at one point with Wagner near the Battle of Bakhmut, and apparently Wagner and the Flash and Torch units ended up getting into a brawl outside the city of Bakhmut for a short while. Not like a firefight brawl, but a slugfest brawl, which is something interesting to note, that there has been an active involvement by oil companies like Gazprom in the war in Ukraine itself. But moving on from that, we've also seen that up in the Bryansk area, while the amount of oil that is being produced by the Russians, really the amount of gas and usable fuels that are being made by the Russians, is continuing to plummet, the amount of crimes being committed in a lot of the Russian oblasts is starting to skyrocket. We were able to get some crime statistics out of the Bryansk Oblast today, and it's very interesting to note this, because when you look at all of these crime statistics, and we can see right here, this is the Belgorod Oblast right here, this top graph figure. We can see right here, this is the Kurskaya Oblast, and then this is the, let's see, Bryanskaya Oblast, so that would be the Bryansk Oblast. But out of all three of these, notice that from 2022 to 2023, there has been a massive skyrocketing of crime being committed within these areas. And from what we're understanding, the massive skyrocketing of crime is because a lot of those Russian prisoners that did end up surviving their 6-month contract actually did get released into the public. The Russian government actually kept their word and allowed them to go back into the public. And with such a massive influx of Russian criminals entering the streets again, the crime rates are skyrocketing in some of these oblasts, like the ones we're seeing right here, specifically Belgorod and Bryansk, and certainly Belgorod. Belgorod went from having a fairly low crime rate compared to other Russian oblasts to now it has the highest crime rate in all of the Russian Federation. Pretty telling that apparently the Russian prisoner soldiers that they had, or the penal battalions, are apparently making their way back to Ukraine, at least the guys who survived, and now they are wreaking hell on earth onto some parts of the Russian public. But beyond that,
Yeah, like they were already inclined to commit crime in the first place, and then you put them in a place that's not their home, where they have no connection to whatsoever, and then they really feel like uninhibited to go commit whatever they want, pillage and rob and take what they want. They did it during the war, so if they did it then, they'll do it now too.
oh, and no doubt, and it looks like they certainly are doing it according to the crime stats. But beyond that, we are starting to see that, at least as far as the strategic side of things go, the domestic issues inside of Russia are certainly going to be coming to a head in the future. Can't say exactly when, because oil refineries getting hit is kind of something that will affect Russia months down the road. That's not something that's really going to affect them today, because they still have oil reserves to work off of. It's just that those oil reserves are not going to be replenished at the rate that they have been at. So maybe months down the road, the Volgograd the oil refinery, or the Lukoil oil refinery, will finally start to have an impact, and we'll start to see that as far as a slowing of the Russian economy or a slowing of the action of the Russian armed forces. But at the exact same time, we can see that in another realm, the domestic issues are also coming to a head as well. With rapidly increasing crime rates in some of these oblasts, it could be very seriously contended that the Russians probably will start to not only have an economic slowing, but also a high increase in crime, and that kind of instability within the public sphere of Russia could create the perfect kind of elements for civil unrest, which could become a massive issue for the Russian government down the line. It may actually be what ends the war, is the absolute struggle of trying to keep the Russian government and the Russian nation alive from the inside. Meanwhile, down in Krasnodar, where a lot of the Russian Air Force is now moved, and especially the A-50 mainstays that were the mainstay of the Russian Air Force's abilities to command their forces here in the southern front, have now been moved into the area of Krasnodar. But not only that, other aircraft and air wings of the Russian Air Force have also been moved down into Krasnodar as well. And with them comes the usual decoys that we've seen all over Ukraine, especially Crimea, and now we're starting to see them here within the area of southern Krasnodar. These two are, of course, aircraft, and once again, note, you can see that these two aircraft, they look to be maybe Su-30s, are casting shadows onto the tarmac, showing that they are three-dimensional. Then you have these literal white silhouettes of jets painted onto the tarmac to make it look like there's another 4 Su-30s sitting here. I don't know who they're fooling, because 1, they don't cast a shadow, 2, these things don't even look metallic, and 3, they're solid white. So unless if Russian aircraft have become a giant cocaine silhouette on the ground, I'm highly doubting that anyone would fall for these things being a real aircraft, except for one person. Aww, man. But anyways, we can see...
He's seeing twos.
But with that, that's the end of that little clip right there. But once again, giving us a pretty good indicator that the Russians are starting to go and try and paint up the decoys again, and it's still giving us a fairly obvious note that the Russians are very scared that Ukrainian drone strikes can reach into Krasnodar and end up destroying Russian Air Force aircraft and assets down there, which is something that they actually have a pretty good reason to believe in. We have seen that drones just hit the Lukoil refinery in Volgograd, which is a pretty good distance from the front lines right now. And let me whip out my ruler and let me measure. It is around 320 miles away, which is about as far as it is from Alabama from tip to toe. Which actually, when you think about that in scale, that is huge. Like, let me make sure. Measure distance. Oh, hang on. Measure distance. And we're going to go down here. Actually, wow, that is a really far distance. That drone strike pretty much, Matthew, from the nearest area of the front line to the actual Lukoil area was around 320 miles. The very northern part of Alabama, near Huntsville, all the way down to Mobile, Alabama, is about 310 miles, just to give a context of how long range that strike really was.
Dang, well, at least they missed Gulf Shores and Destin with that.
At least they did. And moving on from that little bit of context there, just to show how big this attack was. Also, for our European viewers, let me show you this. Because, you know, Alabama has no context. For European viewers, I know all of y'all know how big Britain is. Just to put that into context, a 320-mile strike means that that drone took off in London and almost landed in... Well, actually, it pretty much almost did land in Edinburgh, just to give a context of how far that drone strike really did occur. And not really a lot of people think about that when we talk about drone strikes. We always talk about 550-mile strikes, but when you put that into perspective, 550 miles is the entire length north to south of the United Kingdom, which is a pretty big distance, or more so 550 miles is almost the exact same distance from Atlanta, Georgia to Washington, D.C., to give a really good idea of how long range these strikes by Ukraine really are. And once again, showing that their technological prowess in the drone field is something that cannot be shrugged off very easily, and something that the Russians are very concerned and very fearful of at this point in the war. But moving on from that news and on into our location unknowns, we actually had a funny one today. We actually had two of them, but moving on to our first one, we got to see a Scooby-Doo van. Like, Zoink Scoop, but this one was bummed out. Like, I'm not even kidding. It looked like a bummed out Scooby-Doo van. There it is.
No. Why does it look like one of those ugly fish, with the mouth open swimming around? Like,
yeah. Dude, you know what this thing looks like? It looks like it just sat there and woke up and went, bleh. That's what it looks like. It's just, dude, it looks like he's about to stick a cigarette in its mouth and start drinking vodka. Because it just can't cope with life. This is the saddest looking Scooby-Doo van I have ever seen. This is the Scooby-Doo van of wisdom. And let's ask it what its wisdom of the day is. Oh, Scooby-Doo van of wisdom, what is your wisdom of today? Make sure, everyone, to not drink on the front lines. You will die. Thank you so much, Scooby-Doo van of wisdom. But beyond that...
That's the wisest Russian that ever walked.
That's the wisest. That's why it's called the Scooby-Doo van of wisdom, man. You aren't wise without being absolutely sad and hating your life. It's like this Scooby-Doo van is. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next little bit of news, I'm actually going to do these in reverse order because I want to make sure we do them in the right sequence. So I'm going to go to this one over here because a Ukrainian soldier adopted a wild raccoon. I'm not kidding. It's an American raccoon as well, which is really wild. I didn't even know they were in Eastern Europe, but here's the clip.
опасный, ах ты опасный штребан. Ай, ты, блядь. Да на, блядь, что ты начал? Не прыгай. Давай на. Опа, хуй тобі вгадав. А ну давай ще. Прости нормально, блядь, ти ворюга, ти єбаний.
Man, I'm guessing it's domesticated. Like, that's a very well-behaved wild animal.
Dude, there's
I've
another
never seen one that calm.
there's another video of this thing too. Like it was sitting on a bed. It's a really cute little raccoon. And it's cool to see Ukrainian soldiers, you know, spending their free time on the lines just doing silly little things to make it more enjoyable, like adopting a raccoon. Here it is on a bed.
Ти нормально, блядь?
It's like a little dog.
Ну віддай, блядь. Та віддай, блядь. Вредина така.
Oh yeah, man, that thing's gotta have been like a pet. It's not going crazy right now.
Ёбаний ти, блядь.
Dude, look at it. It's ripping everything apart.
Кончений.
Oh, it's cute though.
It is cute, but those things are vicious, man. They got some teeth on them.
Man, they do. I mean, like, us being here from America, which raccoons are all over the place here in the United States, these things are pretty vicious, and I wouldn't get close to one like this. But still, this one's very cute, and it seems to be very well-tempered, too. But still, with that, I hope that does show that fairly well, and I love to see that the Ukrainians are doing something fun here and there to pass the time. But moving on from that, I would also have to say that some people have been talking a little bit, because I absolutely forgot to cover this news, y'all. I have to actually move away from the location unknowns for a second and move on down to Crimea, because this was actually supposed to be a part of my Russian Air Force segment where I talked about the decoys. But down here in Crimea, we are still getting more information and more evidence that the strike on Belbeck airfield, amongst many others that occurred several days ago, have actually ended up producing some severe damage that the Russian Air Force and the Russian Armed Forces may not be able to recover from at all. We got some satellite pictures today from Belbeck airfield showing that the Russian radar relays there at the airfield had been hit and completely destroyed. This was the before picture. This was the after picture, showing that the radar facility was completely obliterated and appears to now be a pile of cinders. This appears to be a overall Ukrainian strategy to try and knock out Russian air defense and radar installations within the entirety of the oblast, so that way air support missions in the future and further drone and missile attacks can make it into the region and attack their targets with a far greater percentage of success. That is something that has been a Ukrainian goal for quite a while, and when you really look at the origin of the war, Crimea is truly the most important part of Ukraine that Russia can control. With the access to Crimea, the Russians are able to keep their Black Sea fleet within the port of Sebastopol and power project into the eastern Mediterranean with relative ease without having to worry about really any major obstacles in the way except for the Turks. And usually the Turks, historically, over the past few decades, never stopped the Black Sea fleet from passing through the Bosphorus and Dardanelles until very recently, and that's because they are officially now at war with Ukraine, so Turkey could ban or bar their naval forces from passing through the Bosphorus and Dardanelles according to the treaties. But beyond that, some people have been saying some things about whether it really would be feasible for Ukraine to take back Crimea. And Matthew, I've heard that you've been thinking and talking about that a good bit.
So a lot of people have been commenting on whether or not Ukraine can actually succeed in taking back Crimea, which is essentially at this point like the holy grail. If Ukraine can take that back, that is considered a massive victory. One person who has been very outspoken about that has been the Polish President Duda, and he says he is not sure if Ukraine will regain Crimea, and he got a lot of backlash for that comment. So understandably, some people were very upset, and it seems like a good portion of people believe that was a fair but yet a polarizing statement to make, which certainly was polarizing to say the least. A lot of people got very upset, including some in the Ukrainian government. And then a good portion of you also say that you disagree with the statement, but he does have free speech, and he should be able to say that if he wants to without fear of reprisal. And only a handful of people believe that's a completely inappropriate statement. And on my part, I will say personally, I disagree with it. I think Ukraine will eventually take back Crimea in time. It's not going to be a fast process, and it's also not going to be immediate. And it's going to take a lot of work to get there. But I think with the support of the West, it will happen, sooner or later. I don't want to give a time frame to it because there's really no telling at this point. But it will happen eventually. But to say it's a fair statement, in my opinion, it's not. But he does have free speech. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, first off, I don't think we should try and suppress people from saying what they think. And we do have to remember that Andrzej Duda and the Republic of Poland has been one of Ukraine's biggest supporters throughout the entirety of the war. And not only that, is becoming the eastern bastion of the NATO alliance, really becoming a fortress in its own right. So I don't really think we should be criticizing the Poles too much, because I think they have a lot going on that's very good inside of Poland. And Andrzej Duda, of course, has been a big supporter of Ukraine, but still, that is a pretty polarizing statement. It is kind of saying that there may be some kind of a draw coming down the line for Ukraine. Crimea is, of course, the most important thing that Ukraine could retake. While Russia may be able to keep the Donbass doesn't really hold a lot of value beyond the Ukrainian people who are living there in occupied territory, which is kind of a de facto thing because there are Ukrainians living in occupied Crimea as well. But there's also a decent amount of resources that are available to the Russians in the future, like some natural gas deposits and a couple of raw materials deposits that exist within the Donbass. But Crimea serves as the strategic asset of the Russian Federation that they currently control in Crimea at the moment. Like I said a moment ago, it is where the Black Sea Fleet operates out of. And if you look back at the very beginning of the war, you will actually see that Russian forces in 2014 rolled out of Sevastopol on their way to annex all of Crimea, before Russian forces actually stepped across the border and into Ukraine to support the Donetsk and LPR Republic separatists. Those instances were only about 2 or 3 hours apart, but the Russian move in Crimea happened first, once again showing that at least on a planning level, Crimea was more important to the Russian Federation than the Donbass ever would be. And it really is when you look at it from a strategic perspective. Going off of that, I would say that it is a polarizing statement to say that Ukraine may not be able to retake Crimea, but he does have free speech, and he has a right to say that, but I personally would disagree with the claim. I think that with continued support from the United States, hopefully that will start up again soon, as well as all of Europe, the Ukrainians probably will be able to keep a good eye on retaking Crimea, on top of the Ukrainians' abilities to attack Russian infrastructure and assets like the Lukoil refinery of Volgograd today that are going to bring the Russian economy to its knees probably within the next year or maybe year and a half. But with that, I think that's my honest opinion at the moment on what could happen in Crimea, and especially with what Andrzej Duda said today. But I would personally have to disagree with his claims. Moving on from that, however, and back into our location unknowns, we did also get to see today that the Ukrainians were able to pick up some more trophy weapons. And at this point, y'all, I'm not going to lie, sadly, I think I'm going to start disqualifying AK-12s as trophy weapons. We are going to classify the AK-12 as a trophy weapon today, but going here forward, I don't think I'm going to be. From what we understand, AK-12s are becoming a lot more common on the front lines in the Russian army than they were at the beginning of the war. We believe that's because AK-12s are fairly easy to manufacture when you really look at them. And I'll pull this up and show y'all, because some people think the AK-12 is like this magical weapon that has nothing in common with any other, and it's this wildly expensive thing. The original prototype was wildly expensive, but when you look at it side by side to an AK-74, and let me make sure to go get a picture of the AK-12 and the AK-74, when you take a look at both of them side by side, they are practically the same rifle. The upper and lower receiver is literally the exact same on both of them. There is no difference at all. The only difference in between the AK-74 and the AK-12 is that the AK-74 has a Picatinny rail along the top dust cover, which has actually posed some issues, but that's a thing for another time. It also has an extendable stock, which most AK-74s do not have. It also has this plastic handguard, which, to be honest with y'all, I don't really know how I feel about plastic handguards on AKs, because the AKs I've shot with plastic handguards, they actually end up getting hot really quick compared to some kind of like a plywood-like handguard on the front like you would find on this AK-74. And really the only other major difference I would say that exists on an AK-12 versus an AK-74 is the piston. It doesn't have this nice little curvature to the front of it like the AK-12 does, and also the muzzle brake is a little different. But beyond that, the AK-12, in theory, is about the same price to manufacture as an AK-74 would be. And especially with the endless amount of oil, and of course, oil is turned into plastics later on down the road that the Russians have today, these AK-12s are not that expensive to manufacture. And as the war has gone on, it appears that the Russians are certainly showing that that is the case. So going off of that, I'm not going to be calling the AK-12 a trophy weapon any longer because they're just becoming way too common. But one gun that really is a trophy weapon is the AS Val. The AS Val is truly rare, just like the VSS Vintorez. Both of these fire a 9x39mm submachine gun cartridge, and these things are wildly rare. You rarely ever see these things, even inside of the Russian Federation. They're almost only used by Spetsnaz and GRU units, or as they call it, girls. But nevertheless, they're exclusively used by the GRU and the Spetsnaz, so you rarely ever get to see these things in Russian hands, or even captured for that matter. So this truly is a trophy weapon, and the AK-12 is cool, but probably becoming less and less of a trophy weapon as the war goes on. Also, another thing...
Is that just a massive suppressor on the front of that gun on the right?
Yes, it is actually an integrated suppressor. It is built onto the gun. And let me go pull it up.
That is huge. That's a... I can't tell from here, but that's the length of a full-on barrel.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, the Val and the Vintorez both have integrated suppressors built onto them.
That is impressive. That is very silent.
Oh, it is super silent. And also, the round that it shoots is a 9x39mm, which is really bizarre. Like, no other gun, I believe, shoots the 9x39. That's what it looks like right there. And the blue tips on these bullets, I believe, indicate that these are the armor-piercing rounds. And this thing actually has, from what I understand, some pretty decent armor penetration capabilities at closer ranges, but it's not a long-range kind of a rifle. It is pretty much a submachine gun, but nevertheless, it is a really cool one, and I gotta say, it's really neat to see these things in Ukrainian hands. Of course, one gun we still have not seen in Ukrainian hands, but I will say we've seen it in American hands on the Grand Thumb channel, is the AN-94. This thing is super rare. Unbelievably rare. As a matter of fact, we don't know of any of these that have ever even been seen in Ukraine at the moment, and we think they probably won't. But what's really cool about the AN-94, Matthew, is that the AN-94 has this neat feature called the hyperburst, which is where when you pull the trigger on automatic, it fires 2 rounds almost simultaneously, and then after those 2 rounds, it just goes into normal automatic fire.
And what's the benefit of that?
The benefit is that you're able to get off 2 shots, and by the way, those 2 shots are fired at around 1,600 rounds a minute. So, I mean, they are shooting out pretty much right after each other. And this thing has a delayed recoil system, so the first shot's fired, the recoil hasn't even hit you yet, and then it fires the second shot, and after that second shot is fired, then you finally feel the recoil of just the one first shot. So you're able to get off 2 shots, pretty much as a single shot, very accurately with this rifle. This was actually supposed to become, way back in the day, back in the 90s, the standard service rifle of the Russian Federation's armed forces, but it never did because it is super expensive and super complicated internally, so it never really made it past the trial phases, and of course, like many Russian projects, it ended up dying. The Irish Republican Army supposedly has a few of these things, and I believe Kyrgyzstan has about 60 of them as well, and there's an unknown number of these inside the Russian Federation, but if Ukrainian is able to get their hands on this thing, that would truly be a trophy weapon for the ages. This would actually belong in a museum if anyone was able to get one of these, but the fact of the matter, no one is probably ever going to get one of these things because they truly are one of the rarest service rifles out there, and they are wildly expensive, and the Russians probably aren't going to even try and sacrifice one of these things near the front. But moving on from that, the little interesting side note about rare Russian guns, because there's not really that many of them. A lot of Russian guns were mass manufactured back in Soviet times, so they're pretty run-of-the-mill, but these are some of the rarer ones that we've seen so far. But moving on from that, one thing that is not rare is the absolute number of Russian soldiers that have been obliterated today over the last 24 hours, along with their Bobcat skid steers. Ooh!
Oh, hey, oh man, we went down from the 8 and the 10. Like we were on such a streak, and now it's down to 3. But I'm happy with that still. The other losses are incredibly high again, so that's wonderful.
And of course, 3 Bobcat skid steers. It's not the greatest we've seen over the past few days, but it's still pretty decent. I mean, you know, 3 Bobcat skid steers, not that bad. It's still a Bobcat skid steer, and that's all that matters. But in the other category,
they're probably from Alibaba, but you know, it's a Bobcat. It counts.
It's one of them Baofeng. It's, you know, Bobcats. Oh, bonjour, bonjour. But nevertheless, apparently a lot of Russian soldiers have been obliterated today, nearly 880 of them, which is an entire battalion tactical group and about another 80 guys on top of that. So almost an entire company of men destroyed on top of a battalion tactical group. 13 armored personnel carriers were also destroyed, along with 36 supply trucks, 10 main battle tanks, 26 artillery systems, 2 drones, a single MLRS, and then no other additional special equipment vehicles over the course of the day. Aircraft, helicopters, anti-aircraft warfare systems, boats, or submarines. None of those have been destroyed. But the frontline losses for the Russian army are once again showing that this grueling war is continuing for the Russians with practically no end in sight. It doesn't really seem like the Russians are doing all that well at fighting a war. It seems as though they're just getting progressively worse as it keeps going. But, you know, congrats to them. Eventually they'll find out that this war isn't worth fighting and they should have never fought it in the first place. But sadly, that is going to be now at least at a minimum of 400,000 Russian lives lost. And who knows how many Ukrainian lives have been lost over the course of this war, because we don't have that information and we don't have those numbers being published accurately. Of course, some people always ask, even pro-Ukrainians ask, what are the Ukrainian loss figures? One can only guess. We actually have no idea. Not even Western nations really have a good grasp publicly on the amount of losses that Ukraine has taken. So we can only take a good ballpark guess. We've actually started to hear that apparently, even according to groups like Radio Free Europe, the estimated Ukraine losses at this point in the war is somewhere in between 150,000 to 200,000 dead. Not the massive kind of margins that we saw at the beginning of the war, where for every 1 Ukrainian soldier that died, nearly 7 Russian soldiers were being killed. It's more so nowadays around, for every 1 Ukrainian soldier that dies, nearly 2 to 3 Russian soldiers are killed for that 1 Ukrainian soldier. So it's still a very good metric, as a matter of fact. You know, if you're looking at it from a number crunching perspective in a war, this is still a pretty good metric to go off of, and showing that the Ukrainians are still effecting a very good defensive war. And not only that, they've also been able to conduct counteroffensives and do those with minimal casualties as well. But sadly, we still have no idea. Back at the beginning of the war, we tried to get an idea of what the Ukrainian casualties looked like by going to the Russian side and trying to see what they said. But we started to learn that they lived in fantasy land, because HIMARS would be given, well, 8 HIMARS would be given to Ukraine, and Russia within the next week would say, on the single day today, we've destroyed 16 HIMARS, when there isn't even that many inside of Ukraine. So, you know, once again, we have really no good way to get an exact number on Ukrainian casualties at the moment, but I'm sure that as time goes on, probably after the war ends, we probably will get that number. But moving on from that, and on out of the location unknowns, it's time for us to start getting on into that frontline news, and we actually have a pretty good amount of it. And there was also an interesting bit of action going on down in the Kherson-Krinky area today, but I want to make sure we move all the way from the north down to the south, kind of in an order. But before we do, Matthew, someone said something pretty interesting in the chat. What do they got to say?
So what we've seen in the chat is very interesting, and we've actually had a comment from 10K, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. Hey! And thank you very much for helping to support the channel and also our work. And they said, do Transformers have car insurance or life insurance? And P.S., LSA, 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 I'm telling you.
And long live the LSA, and thank you, 10K, for being one of our European viewers and helping the channel to run. And also, to answer your question, I have no idea. That's like the Fred Flintstone. If you're from Europe, you may not know what the Flintstones are, because it was like an old American cartoon that ran in the 60s and 70s. But when we were growing up as kids, it was replaying. There was like reruns going on in this like Cartoon Network. But I always thought, you know, if Fred Flintstone like ground his foots down to nubs while driving his like car, who does he call? A doctor or a mechanic? You know, like, his feet are like operating as the brakes of a car, so if they like, you know, if they like get ripped off or something while he's driving the car, is that like a mechanical issue, or is that like an issue for a doctor? It's a good question, as a matter of fact, and it's a lot like yours. It's in a very similar vein. But nevertheless, I got to thank you so much.
You know, you're from Alabama. You have like a foot problem, like you rubbed your foot raw on the ground from using them as brakes, and you're gonna spray some WD-40 on it.
Boy, we're about to whip out that oil. But still,
I'm telling you, man.
Thank you.
Forgetting antiseptic, we're throwing WD-40 on it.
Man, we are going to be throwing down that WD-40. You know what I mean, man. You know what I mean. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for support 10K and helping the channel to keep on running. And I hope I was able to address that the best I can. But moving on from that and on up into our northeastern news for a quick second near Zaluzhnyi, we got to see an interesting Humvee convoy on the move today. It was actually a pretty interesting little spotting here. Of course, the snowfall was heavy, but we got to see a mix of different kinds of Humvees. Hold up. What the hell is that? Okay, that's... Wait a minute, that's a rerun. Hold on, I'm sorry, y'all. This was presented today like it was brand new, and for some reason it fooled me, but as soon as I saw it on air, I was like, that's a rerun. So sorry, everyone. We're going to be moving on from that and towards the area of Vilshana, where we got to see the Ukrainian armed forces conducting some pretty accurate drone strikes near Sinkivka village. Just to give a little bit of context, the Russians have currently been conducting an offensive in this area of the front line towards a small village called Sinkivka, and it's near to Zaluzhnyi. It is... Let's see, Sinkivka. Come on, it's on this map, over here, right there. So it's south of Zaluzhnyi. Sorry, that's why I wasn't seeing it. It's right down here. The Russians have been trying to conduct an offensive near the area of Vilshana and Sinkivka, and it appears that at the moment, the Ukrainians have been stopping them dead in their tracks before they can advance any farther. Today was a very similar story, with the Ukrainians, of course, bringing forward their drone support and dropping bomblets onto advancing Russian infantry to break up their forces, wipe them out, and also force them into a rout. But here is the clip. We see a whole bunch of Russians laying down on the ground. We can see one kind of waddling around as another grenade is dropped. And oh my goodness, chunky. We now see another F1 grenade being dropped, and call that Russian Max Verstappen because he ran under that grenade and took it like it was some kind of a speed record or something. Pretty impressive. And also, if y'all appreciate the Ukrainian armed forces doing a good job with their drone forces, put an LSA in the chat. Put an LSA.
Also smack that like too if you... Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Yikes.
Yikes, man. I guess you could say... almost blew his top there. But still, when you see them continuing to drop bomblets, it appears that they're dropping a bomblet onto a BMD, actually, a BMD-2, and now it's turned into a nice campfire for the Russians. We can now see another drone coming in and observing a Russian walking through the field.
You shouldn't do that. That's not smart.
No, it is not. And he's about to become one with the field.
He said, "Oh, do I hear something above my head? Oh, it's just the birds."
Man, that is one loud bird bleat.
Plot twist, there are no birds out here.
Plot twist, the birds are government spies. But we can see the drone dropping the bomb. Oh! Just a quick little flash.
That sucks. Like, his comrades probably thought, oh, that bird just doo-doo bombed him. But it's actually a bomb, a real one.
Dude, I bet you could get the same kind of effect right here if you went to Venice Beach and you gave all of the seagulls laxatives. I bet you could get the same effect right here at Venice Beach.
That would be gnarly.
Dude, I actually saw someone do that the other day, man. I don't even know when, but they sat there and they got a bunch of French fries and they covered them in liquid laxatives and they just threw them out for the seagulls to eat. The seagulls ate them, and I'm not even kidding. The entire beach was covered in, droppings. I was like, why would they do that? Like, I was like, that was so messed up. Ruined everyone's day.
You gotta have a lot of time on your hands to, have the time to go find the laxative, go get the French fries, and bring them back just to feed them to the seagulls. Like, who does that?
Pretty messed up. And Justin S. says, what is that laugh, LOL? That's the seagull laugh. We're going to be eating fries, you know what I mean? And hot dogs. Oh, what do you mean, Jack? We're gonna be eating fries and hot dogs. But we can see the Ukrainians continuing to slam the Russians inside of their trenches. And would you just look at this?
Whoa, there was something that went across the screen. I couldn't tell what that was.
That was the bomblet. That's the bomblet.
It's like a ghost.
Ooh.
Wriggling.
It's about to turn a Russian into a ghost here in a second. Check this out. And holy moly, thank you so much, Mark the Kinetic Possum. Goodness gracious. What does he got to say? What does he got to say, Matthew?
Guess what? Guess what Mark's saying? Mark the kinetic opossum, he put in a 150 New Zealand. Very generous of you, Mark, and thank you very much.
Unbelievable.
He says, apparently Russia can make/refurbish 4 tanks per day, the new Soviet era. So as long as we continue at 4 plus, their ability to keep fighting has a sunset, as long as the West keeps supporting.
And I thank you for the massive amount of support, Mark. And that's actually a very good super chat actually to throw in, talking about what we're seeing right here. There is a finite number of tanks that the Russians have, and that number is something that I've seen in the background, but I always make sure to not say things like that with certainty on air, because I don't really know if we actually have an exact reason to believe only 4 can be produced instead of more, because 4 is a very small number. But beyond that, that is true. That's the number I've seen right now. And as long as Ukraine is able to destroy more than 4 Russian tanks a day, they will run the Russians dry of any kind of main battle tanks within the future, probably within this next year at least. And that will be a massive contributor to seeing this war end, as this drone footage goes into daylight and shows the Ukrainians conducting daytime bombing operations with the drones. But certainly a very true statement, Mark. And I gotta thank you for the massive amount of support, and also being an old guard and a channel legend here, always watching the stream and helping it to keep rolling. It means a lot to us that folks like you appreciate the channel enough that you would help us to keep this thing running and help us to be able to cover news like what's going on in the Sinkivka and Vilshana area right now. And so with that, we can see the Ukrainians, as Mark was literally just talking about the number of tanks that the Russians could produce, we can see that apparently the armored personnel carriers were also going to be needing some replenishments as well. Oh my god. What was that, a clown car? Dude, they like hit the thing. Look at this. I don't see... Well, actually, no, I see them now. I did not see Russian infantry on that BMD a second ago, so when it got hit, I was like, where the hell did all the guys come from? Because it explodes, and then all of a sudden, there's just a whole bunch of guys standing around the BMD.
They just rolled right off the side.
Man, they just rolled out of bed in the morning. Oh, and that guy just rolled right back into the trench in the morning. Man, the drone bombings are getting so accurate at this point. It's crazy to watch.
It's like they're using a cheat or a aimbot.
Yeah, apparently these Ukrainian drone operators have been installing all the hacks. You know, they've been doing the little Xbox thing, you know, left, right, up, down, A, X, Y, or whatever you do back in the day to get, like, the cheats. But anyways, pretty interesting to see, and great to know that the Ukrainians are still stopping the offensives heading towards Sinkivka. Moving on from that, and a little bit further down, we got to see that the Russians apparently were using a brand new mine clearer in the area today. This thing is straight out of Mad Max. I don't even know what it's based off of, because it has a giant plow. It looks a little bit like it would have been an MTLB, but then it doesn't. And I have absolutely no idea what this thing is based off of, but it's one of their new mine clearing vehicles. Bizarre. That's all I gotta say. Just absolutely bizarre, but I guess the Russians are trying, I guess, at this point. But moving on down towards Yehidny, we also got to see the Ukrainians apparently had a misfiring mortar today, a 120mm mortar round, as though they had to give the mortar the little shimmy to try and get the round back out. By the way, the round is live. The music is very romantic. We can see.
What's he doing, though? That guy on the left? What the hell's he doing?
Man, they just giving it a little shimmy, you know what I mean? They just giving it a little shimmy. And they finally got it out.
Man, it needed a shimmy, not a love tap.
Man, that's the end of the clip. But this, my friends, is how brand new mortars are brought into the world. But moving on from that, and into our next clip, which is actually out of this battlefield. That was really all the news we had from the northeastern battlefield today, and it appears that beyond that, battle activities are favoring the Ukrainian defensive, and once again showing that they were able to claim victory on the battlefield again today. Moving on from that and into the area of Rye-Horodka, we got to see a really cool T-72. Usually I crap on tanks that are like Franken tanks, but I gotta admit, the T-55 road wheels are drippy, and I gotta say, it's really cool to see a T-72 with T-55 road wheels on it. I'll get y'all a normal T-72 for comparison, so let me go get one of those, so that way I can show you all the road wheels. Let's see here. So, I gotta find a good picture here. A good one. It's gonna be a great one, Matthew. It's gotta be a one. Here we go. So, this is what a normal T-72's road wheels would look like down there at the bottom. That's kind of what most of them look like. But This one replaced its normal T-72 road wheels with T-55 road wheels, which you can see in the picture. And I gotta say, it's pimping. I mean, those are some pretty pimpy looking road wheels right there.
They put the bigger rims on this tank. They had to like fix it up.
Dude, they were in the garage refitting this thing, and you just heard "Pimp My Ride" playing on the stereo as they were putting these road wheels on. They were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna be pimping today."
They're gonna roll into the battlefield on their 6 foes.
That's it, cruising down the street. And wait a minute, it wouldn't be six. It wouldn't be 6, dude. If you're in Ukraine and you're operating a T-64, you can actually say "cruising down the street in my 6 foe." But with this thing, you go "cruising down the street in my 7.2." You know, it's just, but anyways, let me get on to the rest of these pictures. Not spend too much time.
Man, those dad jokes. I'm telling you what. I'm telling you what. I
hope people appreciate it. Like, I hope people are appreciating them, man, because it takes a lot out of me. It's not easy being cheesy, but we can see the T-72 here from the front. I like the camo that they have on it, and also the ERA tiles. They're just painted yellow like corn on the cob here and there. And also, in the last picture, we get to see our Ukrainian tank commander sitting here with his cupola open and taking a look behind the tank at something. Also, padded tanker helmet, a common mainstay of really everyone in Eastern Europe for the rest of all time. But beyond that, really neat to see a pimped out T-72. What can I say? It's just cool. It's cool as hell. But one thing that is certainly not cool, but wildly impressive and admirable, are the Ukrainian defenders of the Kreminna forest, or the Seboronsky forest. They have been holding this line down here for such a long time, against such high and insurmountable odds. And the Ukrainians today were able to make an entire mini documentary, thanks to United 24, about the defenders like the 12th Azov and the International or the Foreign Legion that have been in the area of Kreminna or the Seboronsky Forest and have continued to fight to try and keep the area clear of Russian forces. This was probably one of the most harrowing videos that I've seen United 24 make, because they got up within about 150 meters to the front lines, which, to put that into metric terms, that means that the Russians are about a football field and a half away. So here's the clip.
Ты лес чудес зашел на своих двух, а вышел без. Да. Змей, я кинул в глазок. 15 литров. Все, с Богом.
I have to be honest, I'm a little nervous because where we're going to is going to be about 100 meters from the Russian positions. So people say it is healthy to take a morning walk. I don't know if that is applicable to the morning walk in the forest of Kreminna, but we are doing it because we are very curious. How is it to be on the forefront position of this piece of the front line, which is Svatova Kreminna axis?
The closer we get, the faster we have to move. The unit we're about to meet has been deployed here since December 2023. 2 months later, these men are still here, holding their positions.
If you take a look, we've got Russian positions at 3, 2, and 1 o'clock, and we're facing 3:30 right now. Our friends and brothers in arms are over there, and they're also on the lookout. The Russians are shooting, but infantry scares me less than artillery and FPV drones. I'm definitely not a fan of those. They're very annoying.
Як часто по вам можуть FPV-шками працювати?
Well, how do I put it? Every day, every hour. It's intense. To be honest, I'm scared.
Всі якісь типу реби окопні, чи як ви протидієте FPV-шкам?
The FPVs? Meet my sister.
Оригінальна відповідь.
Oh?
Jokes aside, we have everything here.
What'd that mean?
50 meters
I have
further.
no idea. All he just said out of the blue, meet my sister, and I went, oh, for real? And then he just never introduced me. Oh, how sad.
That was like one of our jokes. The punchline kind of went flat.
Dude, that joke bombed so bad an oil refinery blew up in Russia.
And we are at the tip of the spear. This position is so close to the Russians that they are not only in front of us, but also to the left and right.
At the moment, we are at the closest point to the bad people, to the Muscovites, the fuckers. They
Well,
are
I guess censorship it's not respected in the United 24 as far as
The
curse words.
bastards.
But I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that, everyone. We're trying to keep it PG here with the language, but sadly
dear.
that just kind of slipped through, you know.
about 150 meters away, no more. Whenever we get eyes on them, we try to destroy them immediately.
Grandpa is a master sergeant. During the Russian assault in December, he stayed with his soldiers for 20 days, refusing to leave for rotation. Today is his 7th day here in a row.
I like how he's pouring up a cupper in the middle of the war.
Yeah, he's just
We shoot.
chilling.
They shoot at us. We shoot at them. They try to dig in, but we strike them. And we also get hit with RPGs and SPGs. It's extremely hard work, but we power through. This is what we are here for. There are very few calm moments. For now, it's quiet. Mostly everything starts around 8 a.m. and it can get very tough.
Grandpa was precise in his forecast. In a few moments, the fight begins.
Man, Grandpa don't play.
That's it. Grandpa whipping out the gap. And Grandpa be whipping him.
So as the crossfire starts, it becomes louder and louder, and just a few seconds ago the position we were just at was aimed at with the Russian 120mm mortar. I don't think they got it, but still it was quite loud, and I think it will only get louder from here.
Якщо б ви типу не почали сьогодні умовно вогонь, ну типу з іншої сторони почалось, бо я так розумію, вас типу грають на випередження.
Of fucking course it would have started from the other side. I'm surprised it's been that quiet at all. 8 in the morning and silence, magic. There's an RPG shooter that won't leave us alone. He constantly runs out and shoots at our positions. But we are on our land, and we are right. Let those ghouls go back to where they came from. Usually, if they're not trying to destroy an exact position, they throw 4 to 5 mines at us and that's it, so-called barrage fire. But judging by the hits right now, they're making adjustments because the explosions keep getting closer and closer and closer. That last hit was about 5 meters away from us. The exact spot from which we were planning to run, give or take.
Ну, перебіжимо трошки пізніше.
The explosions intensify, forcing us to run back to the command post. The sun is up, leaving us exposed. Soldiers avoid traveling in daylight as much as possible. It's close to a suicide mission, but we have to take this risk. Our lives are now in the hands of Pavlo and Denise, National Guard officers, in their previous lives a theater director and a restaurant manager.
We run a bit to get to a wooded area so that, for example, a grenade launcher firing straight at us can hit the trees and ricochet. But a mortar fires an arced trajectory, so it won't help.
I like how he's carrying around a Ukrainian flag on him. A very small thing that you really can't notice unless you look really well. But what that is probably a 3 foot by 5 foot Ukrainian flag that has been rolled up and he's tied to the side of the backpack here. Something that I hardly noticed. But I was like, oh, that's nice. So that way whenever he gets the chance, if there was ever a moment to raise a Ukrainian flag, he has one on him.
Good thinking.
They fired right at our backs. And every 30 seconds, as we went forward, they fired at the spot we just left. Now, as I understand it, the artillery shelling of our positions has started.
Oh, we almost tripped.
Which can last about half an hour, and this repeats every 2 or 3 hours, and that can go on all day.
5 hours after leaving the position, we get a call. The Russians managed to kill one of the National Guard soldiers and injure 2. Among them is Grandpa, the Master Sergeant. The position were heavily damaged, but the unit is holding out. Here, in the freezing forest of Kreminna, where drones fly instead of birds, and instead of animals, Russians roam the woods.
Dang, so they end up getting Grandpa, the one that they just showed at the beginning of the video?
Yeah, Grandpa ended up dying.
Jeez.
Just hours after.
I wasn't expecting that.
That's very unfortunate to hear stuff like that, but of course it's a reality of a war like this that soldiers will end up dying, even on the Ukrainian side. And it's something very seldom mentioned here on this channel, but there are Ukrainian lives that are being laid down in the defense of their nation every single day. It's not a bloodless war for the Ukrainians. While they are taking less casualties than the Russians, innocent blood is being spilled each and every day as these brave soldiers, a lot like Grandpa, continue to try and hold the ground against this never-ending Russian assault, trying to make sure that their nation will continue to survive and win this war somehow. It's also something interesting to look at what United 24 did today, because the journalism that they conducted was true journalism, true war journalism. It's not going to a bar in some city way off in safety and acting like that's really doing something. United 24 is one of the most incredible organizations out there at the moment, along with Radio Free Europe that also does a very similar thing, where they are able to integrate news crews with frontline forces and actually give us a very good glimpse of what the frontline looks like. I could only wish that our channel was able to do something similar and be able to go over into Ukraine and actually see the lives of soldiers and get to talk to them while they're actively fighting on the front lines, because that's what I believe the true mark of war journalism is. And not only should respect be given to Grandpa, who, of course, laid down his life that day in defense of the nation in the Severonsky Forest, and the other 2 National Guardsmen that were wounded along with him in the attack, but a massive amount of respect should be given to real war journalists like these here at United 24 that are giving us an insight into the war that very rarely is ever being seen at this point. But moving on from the Severonsky Forest and the amazing news, not really amazing, but still very insightful news that we were able to get today, it's time for us to move down towards Verno, kamyaka, where we got to see a more laid-back and a lot safer approach to war from the K2 battalion attached to, I believe, the 3rd Brigade, which was conducting drone strikes against Russian forces in between the area of Verno, kamyaka and Bakhmut. We see them here flying out their drone. And as the K2 battalion says, the night bombers are going out to destroy the enemy infantry. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks. It's a shout out for them and us. And we see that they've now found their first Russian soldiers of the day, dropping a bomblet on them. and hitting, I think, right above their trench. Not inside of it, right over the berm, so one of them may have been wounded, but probably no dead in that one hit. And we see now the drone continuing to try and adjust so that way its next bomblet falls on target. We see them continuing to hit with some pretty good accuracy. We now see one bomblet falling on top of one Russian, taking him out immediately. And we now see the drone with its final bomblet, its fourth bomblet, trying to line up to hit the other Russian soldier that was in the small trench.
I like the fact they have a bomb counter on the left side. That's pretty convenient.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Is that something they added in the edit, or is that something like that's on their screen?
I think it's something that's on their screen, because they have a lot of stuff, apparently, that was on the interface that they blurred out here in this film.
Interesting.
Ooh, and they got him dead on, so he's out. he's out and about. The war is over for him. And we can see that the reconnaissance drones have apparently spotted an enemy vehicle off in the distance, which the Ukrainians are going to find and destroy here. And we see the bomblet exploding right there. Dead on target, knocking it out. And now we can see the drone footage fading out as they go on into their next drone attack. Apparently the night bombers are once again going out to destroy the enemy infantry. You see, that's what you're called after you have beans for dinner, and you wake up in the middle of the night, you gotta quickly run to the bathroom. They call that a night bomber. But we can see right here that the Ukrainians are really working hard on getting their night bombers out there and really putting down some crap on the Russians. Their version of a toilet.
Depending on how bad it is, sometimes it's called a tragedy.
Sometimes, depending on how bad it is, it's called a U.S. airstrike on the Middle East. Oh, man. And it's devastating and filled with hellfire and fury, the likes of which have never been seen. But anyways, we can see the drone bomblet hitting the Russian group dead on in the first hit. But we can see that the Ukrainians are not going to be taking any chances, and the third bomb has been armed and is ready to drop.
I don't know why tonight, but I feel like when I'm laughing, I feel like I'm doing that Jim Carrey skit where he's like imitating how, those like billionaires laugh and stuff like that. Like, oh!
Yeah,
I feel paranoid about how I'm laughing tonight. I'm thinking about that skit.
Oh man, watch out. The bots will come in and be like, you laugh ugly, and then they'll really try and dig it into you.
They'll try to stick it to you.
Yeah, they'll try to stick it to you, not dig it in you. But, you get the picture. And the second bomblet doesn't actually look like it exploded, interestingly enough. I think that may have been a dud. So they dropped the fourth one now. And that one was not a dud. Got them dead on again. And we can see that they were able to confirm that these guys are a loss. An insurance write-off, as they call it. The night bombers are once again flying out to destroy enemy positions now. Not enemy infantry, but the positions. We can see a Russian trench right here. very World War I-esque trench with really no actual symmetry or design to it, which is very cool. We see them now.
We got some true Russian dedicated bots in here tonight. We got that pure bot style coming in here. They said, laugh all you want. Russia's got it under control, basically. It's like, then how come we're not seeing that? These videos are showing us otherwise. They're literally sitting here the entire stream watching bomblet after bomblet, destroying Russians and their equipment every single night, back to back, and they jump in here talking about Russia's got it under control. It's like,
man,
what are you seeing that we're not seeing?
3 more days, Papa. 3 more days. it's 2 years later. It's like, man, I gotta tell you, man, pro-Russians and Russian bots are brain dead, man. Like, I can't even kid at this point. You gotta be brain dead to think the Russians have a chance in hell of winning, especially considering it's been going on for 2 years, and they have not gained an inch of ground since month 1. And then people will go, yeah, but they took Bakhmut. Yeah, they took, like, one small town, and it took them, like, 9 months, and beyond that, they haven't taken anything else. So what do they have under control? 3 more days, Papa. 3 more days.
Really what they mean when they said the Russians have it under control, they mean the losses have stabilized at a mere, like, 1,000 troops a day instead of 1,500. Oh, Russia's got it under control. Don't worry. They're barely losing any troops anymore. It's just $1,000 a day. Don't worry.
It's only $1,000. Dude, it's like Mr. Beast. It's only $1,000. What is something that Mr. Beast and the Russian Federation say? It's only $1,000. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the K2 battalion and on down into the area of Bakhmut, because the battlefield was fairly quiet today, but we did get one interesting clip showing us some improved M113 turrets. These are pretty cool, because the Ukrainians have been working on trying to protect their machine gunners on the M113s, and so they've made these turrets right here to protect their crew members. And while some people will be like, oh, that's kind of archaic a little, funnily enough, the US actually did the exact same thing when we were using the M113s in Vietnam. We ended up making improvised turret shields as well, very similar to these in their design, which is pretty cool to see that it pretty much come all the way around full circle in Ukraine in the 21st century. But moving on from that, and down out of Bakhmut and towards Avdiivka, we only got one clip from the battlefield in Avdiivka today. Of course, we do have to doubly check that the front lines have not moved in Avdiivka, so let's take a look. No frontline changes at all. That's shocking. I swore that Russian bot just said the city was surrounded, but apparently he has not really learned how to exactly articulate correct statements. We can start off on this one. I'm going to actually help out this Russian bot a little bit on getting a correct statement going on right here. When you say something that's truthful, you have to say it with a lot of certainty, like I'm about to say this. Your mother knows everyone. Let's try that together. But beyond that, one thing that's interesting about the Battle of Avdiivka is that the Battle of Avdiivka has been going on for a very long while now, at least since around October of last year, and it's been going on strongly ever since. However, we have seen that apparently, and also, what the hell, Matthew? I just noticed that. Hadn't that person been around for a minute?
I don't think so, but just as a general word of advice, if you see anyone in the live chat claiming to be a soldier or anything like that, and they give you like a cash app or some kind of cash account, don't follow it. I'm sure that most people know that, but just don't do it because they're probably lying. Because if they were really in need of help and things like that, they would reach out to a legitimate organization, not come here, asking the audience for money.
Yeah, do not give, one thing I gotta say, do not give money to groups you don't know nothing about, especially people in the live chat or the comment sections of our streams. Never take what they say seriously, because it's most likely a scam. Like, I'm gonna say 99% chance it is a scam. But moving on from that, and back into the big picture of Avdiivka, we are starting to hear that apparently the commander who has been able to effect an amazing defense of Avdiivka has officially been stated that he is being fired. Some people have been saying that it was a rumor. Some people said that it was actually some kind of propaganda actually being put out that Zelenskyy was going to be fired. But today, Zelenskyy actually did give an official notice to the United States saying that General Valery Zaluzhnyi is actually going to be fired and removed from his position. Matthew, I think you got a lot to add to that.
So we're learning here that we've officially gotten confirmation that Zelenskyy has spoken to the U.S. government and has formally notified them that he does intend to fire General Zaluzhnyi. So obviously that is a very big discovery, because we were wondering if he was actually going to follow through with it, We don't have a timeline as to when this is actually going to be finalized, but he has made his intentions known that Zaluzhnyi is on the way out the door. So it looks like a good portion of people are really unsure what this is going to lead to, or whether or not it's going to have an impact in a bad way or a positive way on the front line. So a good portion of people aren't really sure, and I would honestly kind of understand why you say that. Also, a good portion of people say this is Zelensky's biggest mistake he'll ever make, while only a few say it'll have a minimal impact, and only a lesser amount of people believe it's a smart decision and strategic. So for me on this one, I'll say that firing Zaluzhnyi with not having a very good replacement to follow up to take his position does not seem like a wise idea. Like we said before, this seems to have some political undertones and undercurrents to it. Maybe Zelensky's getting rid of Zaluzhnyi because he's worried about his threat to his power. I'm not really sure what his plan is with this, but Budanov, who is the intelligence officer of Ukraine, seems to be the most viable and upcoming option to replace Zaluzhnyi, and he doesn't nearly have the same level of experience that Zaluzhnyi has. So, without a viable replacement, this seems very unwise, and hopefully Zelenskyy will at least stave this off until he finds a more viable replacement to take his position. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I would actually have to go with about a quarter of y'all who said that this may be Zelensky's biggest mistake. I've been very vocal over the past few days, saying that the removal of Valery Zaluzhnyi would be a bad idea, especially if his planned replacement is Budanov. That is not going to be good. And I would have to say that this probably is one of the biggest mistakes that Ukraine can make over the course of the war. I'm pro-Ukrainian all the way. But I'm not pro-Ukrainian to the point of saying that everything is perfect and everything is a perfect decision. This seems like a bad decision to me. Of course, some people are saying there's got to be a reason. We know the reason. It was the Southern Offensive being a failure. That was when we first started to hear Zelenskyy openly diss on General Zaluzhnyi for one reason or another, and so we know that's when the problem formed. There is no reason to blame the failure of the Southern Offensive on Zaluzhnyi. The information that they had and what they tried to do was very reasonable at the time. They even tried to change the doctrine to make it more successful of a battle, or more so of an offensive campaign. And the fact that he's pretty much been blamed for the failure of the offensive, that's something that I've got to say, not really a big fan of. So in my personal opinion, I think this may be a pretty big mistake, at least in my opinion. And I see some people apparently getting very, it seems violent in the chat over my opinion. I've got to say this really quickly. Just because I am a pro-Ukrainian YouTube channel does not mean that I'm going to say that every single option that Zelenskyy makes is God walking on water, because some decisions have been quite poor. For example, trying to start legal action against Poland and other countries because they're not wanting to take cheap Ukrainian grain and destroy their own agricultural industries, well, honestly, to me, was a dog-headed idea. This also seems to be another one, at least in my opinion. It does not seem smart to take someone who is as competent and as capable as Valery Zaluzhnyi and remove him from his position for someone like Budanov. Like, for example, let's just go over the things that Valery Zaluzhnyi did right. The defense of Kyiv, the defense of Kharkiv, the Balaklia counteroffensive, the Kherson counteroffensive, the defense of Bakhmut, the defense of Avdiivka, the defense of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, the defense of, hell, really everywhere. The offensive in the Southern Front was the only failure that Zaluzhnyi ever had. Publicly. There was no other failures militarily that Zaluzhnyi ever had. He did a very good job. And that's something that I would have to say, I don't think it's a smart idea to remove him for one failure. He has such an amazing rap sheet and track record as the Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine that his removal seems to be a great disservice to the armed forces, in my opinion.
Also, Enforcer, I see some folks in the comments saying that maybe the United States put pressure on Zelensky's government to basically remove Zaluzhnyi because he wasn't listening to Western advice. One thing I'll say that might maybe indirectly support that theory is that the United States did not try to talk Zelenskyy out of firing Zaluzhnyi. They didn't really give him any advice whatsoever. For once, in a long time, the United States was completely neutral on that decision, according to a couple of different sources. So to me, that strikes me as maybe the United States might have indirectly wanted Zaluzhnyi out, but there's no evidence that shows directly that they wanted to get him fired. So I don't think we can make that conclusion, but that is a working theory. But I think it's more likely that Zelenskyy simply does not want a equal political rival to his power that Zaluzhnyi was becoming. But one thing, though, when you start firing people over political reasons, especially with Zaluzhnyi having such a following in Ukraine, you're going to start having divisions sown amongst your own people, because now you have infighting and factions that are competing for power when there really shouldn't be that problem in the first place, because Zaluzhnyi hasn't stepped out of his lane. He's in the military and Zelensky's in charge of the government, and there's been no signs that anyone's trying to usurp anyone's power. So, we don't want to start jumping the gun and start taking people out prematurely, because then you're going to start causing anger amongst the population. And in a war, you need everyone together. You don't need people upset about political topics, because that's going to drive people apart.
I would have to be honest, and I'm seeing some people say, this is apparently one of the biggest issues that people have had with what I said. How in the world was the Southern Offensive a failure? I'll explain why. There were two objectives of the Southern Offensive. The primary objective was for the Ukrainian armed forces to reach the city of Melitopol and split the Russian land bridge in two, completely stopping the Russians from being able to access their forces inside of Kherson, and then paired with a strike on the Kerch Bridge, that would pretty much cut off all Russian forces in this part of Ukraine from any kind of large amounts of supplies, making sure that they would be easy work for the Ukrainian armed forces to fight against and retake the ground. That was the plan during that offensive. And and I don't know, people like to look at things through rose-tinted vision, but we were on this channel before that offensive even began, talking about what the Ukrainians would do if this offensive kicked off. The offensive then kicked off. The Ukrainians clearly stated for about 2.5 weeks, our plan is to reach Melitopol by the end of this offensive. That would be considered a successful offensive and a victory. And a secondary objective was to reach the city of Tokmak. If Tokmak city was reached, that would be a major stepping stone for the Ukrainians to then focus on moving to Melitopol in a second offensive. So they had two separate objectives, a primary objective and a secondary objective. The secondary objective was not even reached, to be a stepping stone towards Melitopol, and the capture of Melitopol never coalesced, or never even got close to coalescing. The Ukrainian top brass, including Zelenskyy himself, all said that the Southern Offensive was not going to plan, especially because of a heavy emphasis on a Western doctrine being used, which was not a usable kind of a doctrine in their opinion in this kind of a war. And so then they switched from the Western US-style doctrine to a more Soviet-style doctrine that the Ukrainian army was familiar with. Even after the change of doctrine, the offensive success that they were looking for never occurred, and that's why they only made it as far as Robotny. We even expected here on this channel that the Ukrainians would at least be able to battle it on towards the next town in the chain, towards Novoprokopivka or Solotka Balka. And if you go back and watch our shows way back in the day when this offensive was going on, and we were literally living during it, we were pretty sure that the Ukrainians at least were going to break the Surovikin line, which goes right in between Ilchinkove and Solotka Balka, and be able to hold a position there at the bare minimum. And they weren't really able to do that. And so going off of that, and also going off of what President Zelenskyy himself said, really the Ukrainians took the Southern Offensive as a defeat, one of the very few battles they've actually lost in the war. And to be quite honest with y'all, I would have to say that that is a fair assessment. And I see that apparently the person that I answered the question for is getting really pissed that I'm saying this. But I'd just like you to keep in mind that just because you're in a war doesn't mean you're going to win every battle. I don't think the United States of America won every battle in World War II or World War I. We didn't win every battle in the U.S. Civil War or the American Revolutionary War. Losing battles is a part of war. And it doesn't mean that now your side is tarnished for all time and you have to commit seppuku in front of the emperor or anything like that. It just means it's a defeat. What happened? Why did it happen? Learn from it and openly admit that it was a defeat to be learned from, and then move on from there. One thing that was learned in the Southern Offensive is that another offensive of that nature in the South probably would not be a viable strategy for the Ukrainian armed forces, and they need to focus on other directions. That's what we know, and that's what we have at the moment. So going off of that, hope that does address that the best I can. And also, really quickly, I have to read this one here. let's see. And so, okay, so I have to read this really quickly because this was the response to me saying that that the Ukrainian army lost one battle, and that's why Zelenskyy, in my opinion, is going and jumping over the gun and removing Zelenskyy from his position. The statement was, BS, quit superimposing your expectations of what when is. Russia is effed and collapsing. There's no stopping it. I don't think we ever even went that far to make it sound like the Russians are winning the war. I think we just said the Ukrainians are losing a battle. And I don't mean to try and start combating you on air, but twist your head on, right? Just because you lose a battle does not mean the entire war has been lost magically. We've known that this was a defeat. It was not a offensive victory, it was an offensive defeat ever since it ended around September. That's been known for a while now. The Ukrainians have even said it themselves. And I'm not one to sit there and be pro-Ukrainian, but deny reality and say that everything has gone perfectly from the beginning of time. That would be absolute bull and bogus. And that's how you end up turning into the Russians. Because the government of Russia can never go, yes, we actually have corruption in the armed forces. They would go, what? You just insinuated corruption? How dare you, prison for 5 years. And then they never learn from what's actually going on because they're too arrogant to ever say that there was a failure or a flaw. So, hope that does address that well. If you're offended by that, I'm sorry, there's not much I can do, because while I'm pro-Ukrainian, like I've said since the dawn of time, my battle analysis is always going to be unbiased and looking at things as they really are. I'm not going to start changing that because it may offend you. I'm going to tell you the honest truth. That's what I hope you watch the channel for. I hope you don't watch it for me to say that everything is always a primrose path that is nothing more than a cakewalk. Because this is war. But go ahead, Matthew.
And also, real quick, I don't want to go too much deeper on this topic, but I did see a good point. Peter Humphreys said he suggested actually to wait for the rationale from Zelenskyy for the firing before reaching a conclusion. And I will say, Peter, there's one thing that Zelenskyy could come out and say that would change my mind on the situation, probably the enforcers as well. If there was any type of insubordination, and this is just a hypothetical, by the way, there's no evidence whatsoever that Zaluzhnyi has been plotting against Zelenskyy, at least publicly, that we've heard about. But if something like that was discovered, that would be a good reason for dismissing him. But at the same time, though, I think that would be made public, because if he was doing something like that, Zelensky's made pretty much all the other instances public about the failures on the front line, or what he perceives to be failures, for maybe one of the reasons he might want to dismiss Zaluzhnyi. So, I don't think they're keeping secrets like that. I think it is what it is. But if something else comes out, obviously that would change the entire equation. So we'll just have to wait and see. But fair point.
Also, I hate to do this, but one more thing. I saw that this person in particular, and I hate to stay on this one more time. They said $1 trillion graveyard. First off, I don't even know where you got that number from. Because yes, the Russians did take a good amount of losses in that offensive. But $1 trillion? You got to be out of your mind, because the Russian economy in a single year is worth 1.2 trillion. The Russian army in the southern front could not be worth $1 trillion, even right now. Maybe somewhere around $150 billion, maybe $100 billion of assets that the Russians have in the entirety of Ukraine at the moment. But to say that off of a $50 billion annual military budget, they are somehow able to amass $1 trillion of equipment to be lost in an offensive and still not lose the entire war right then and there, that is a little wild. It was close, from what we know, the actual monetary losses of the Zaporizhzhia offensive that the Russians took was somewhere approximately around less than 10 billion. It's not like an incredibly high loss of $1 trillion, because I don't think even the United States could recover from a single offensive costing that much money over about 2 months. But with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news, which is near the area of Avdiivka, where we got to see an Archer SPG firing a rocket-assisted shell. We got to see our first picture here, and moving on into the other picture, we got to see the rocket-assisted shell flying off into the distance here. Of course, I have to say, these little Archer SPGs are absolutely cool. I love these things. It's great to know the Swedish provided them. And not only that, the rocket-assisted shells are pretty freaking cool as well. They add a few miles of range to these 155mm artillery shells that are being used by, 155mm guns that have been continuing to really wreak a lot of havoc on Russian front lines. But moving on from that and into our next bit of news, well behind the lines, we got to see something very interesting today that is showing that the Russian helicopter forces are apparently weaker than we're actually believing them to be. We've known that somewhere around 30 to 40 Ka-52s have been shot down over the course of the Ukraine war, which is literally around 40% of their Ka-52 helicopter forces that have been destroyed. But apparently, some have been damaged, or some have broken down and have no longer been able to operate properly, because we're starting to see clear signs of cannibalization within the Russian helicopter forces that is indicating that they really are running out of helicopters to a rate that we can't even really understand here. To show you all this first picture, what you're seeing here is your standard run-of-the-mill Ka-52 that looks like it's been through the absolute ringer. But something that's very interesting to note here is if you look at the cockpit canopy, you can notice that the side-opening cockpit door is actually a different camouflage pattern, showing that it actually came from another Ka-52 that apparently has been cannibalized because it's no longer a functional Ka-52. So they just took parts of it and put them onto other helicopters. And the next picture we can also see here the camouflage colors of a certain Ka-52 that was seen way early on in the war. It was in the Ukrainian theater. And then later on, we saw that a Ka-52 took off with the exact same camo pattern that was on the vertical stabilizer, well, actually the rudder of this Ka-52 here. Notice the camo pattern right here, Matthew, how it makes a left squiggle and then a hard right one up to the top of the vertical stabilizer. This one has the exact same camo pattern on it, showing that this Ka-52 apparently, while not being destroyed, has apparently broken down. Replacement parts can't be found, and so now it's sitting here and being cannibalized for parts wherever this thing has ended up. And it's showing that apparently there are far less Ka-52s operational than we really thought. I would believe at this point, maybe only about 40 Ka-52s are operational in the entirety of the Russian armed forces, and about 60 of them have probably been destroyed or damaged beyond being usable in action. But still, pretty interesting to see, pretty interesting to note something like that as well. And moving on from that in all the way past the southern front, because of course it's a very quiet part of the front lines, we're now moving on down into the area of Kherson. And I'm actually going to be passing over this one because it's more indirect action today than direct action against the armed forces on the ground. But we did get to see that the 36 Marines were firing one of their rocket artillery pieces at the Russians near Kreminna. And here's the clip. And we're going to be muting that, but we can see them loading it and getting it ready to go.
It's a very foggy night that night.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and dang, dude, they're whipping that grad. Goodness.
That thing is booking. It's like a trophy truck.
Good God, man.
I didn't know those things could go that fast.
Me either. That thing's going like 60.
Turbochargers.
Oh my God, dude, I'm blown away. Like, the shoot and scoot on these things, it's scooting. It's scooting, baby. But we can see them setting up the grad, getting it ready to fire. We see him in the cab firing the rockets. It's always neat to watch these things operate. This is just wild to think it's literally just carrying around rockets on a truck bed and you just fire them off into the distance and then move on along. And they are moving. Like, I mean, every single time we see them, they are really moving. But that's the end of the clip. Sadly, we didn't get to see the rockets impact on the other side of the river, but we did get to see the Russians show a damage assessment, apparently after this grad barrage hit their camp. So here's the clip. We see a knocked out BTR as the horror music starts playing, and a knocked out Scooby-Doo pickup truck. And we see another one knocked out as well.
That's the same one we saw earlier, wasn't it?
Like, Zoink Scoop, they're all the same. Bleed.
Raggy, are those a duplicate?
I am the freaking UAC, the Scooby-Doo van of
No. This is the same one because it's got the same like problem going on the left side of the wheel and stuff over here.
Well, Matthew, why don't you ask it a question of wisdom?
What you mean?
Ask it. Oh, Scooby-Doo van of wisdom, what is your secrets?
I'm the same one you saw earlier, boy. What you talking about?
But anyways, you can see him showing it. Oh my lord, dude! This looks like a movie set right here. You know, for like the Avengers or something. Like jinkies, dude. It looks like a movie. But anyways, we can see a BMD knocked out there, and the video clip ends. But very nice to see that apparently that grad was fairly accurate from what we can tell. But moving on to our next clip, we also get to see that the Ukrainians shot down a Zala drone in the area as well. The Russians may have the Zala, but the Ukrainians got that Zaza. They blew that thing into oblivion. Look at that. Well, that's the end of that clip, but showing a little bit of the action that's been going on in that area of the front. We're going to be moving on from the areas of Ukraine now, and we're actually going to be going all the way down into the Middle East. Believe it or not, this place is the middle of the East. It's right in between the Western world and the Eastern world, so we call it Middle East. But what's been very interesting is that apparently the Houthis and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps today have been caught in the middle of U.S. airstrikes that are still happening in the area. We heard today specifically that heavy U.S. strikes have been conducted against Houthi forces within Houthi-controlled Yemen. We got to actually see the video of some of the strikes that occurred near the capital of Sina inside of Yemen, which is currently controlled by Houthi terrorist forces. Here's the clip. Ooh. Oh! Whoa! Man, America ain't playing, and the power went out. Oh! Oh my goodness!
This guy's losing his mind out here.
He's just saying stuff.
But sorry, speaking gibberish.
Dude, he went, and then I was like, whoa. I was like, I don't even think that's Arabic. Like, I just think that's just noises. Like, but anyways, moving on from that, we also got to hear.
He learned a whole different language. He got so scared, he started speaking like something. I don't even know what it was.
Dude, he was talking in Arabic, and then he went, and then like the next shockwave him, and he went, it's like, what the hell? But speaking of which, speaking of raw gibberish, y'all wouldn't believe it, but the Houthis actually came out today and spoke raw gibberish. According to what we heard today from Apex, and also, why are the messages showing up on our screen? What the hell is that? Anyways, Houthi senior officials following US-UK strikes in Yemen stated that we will meet escalation with escalation. So I'm going to tell you all this whole thing in the Middle East is not going to be going away anytime soon. I'm pretty sure we are going to get heavily involved in the Middle East because these people are not backing down. They probably would back down if we hit their puppet masters in Iran, but it seems as though we're really just wanting to kind of bide our time and wait for this whole thing to escalate until we're forced to go over there and deal with the situation. But we also got to hear that the U.S. Navy was involved in the strikes. According to OSINT Technical, you were able to get a picture today of some of the photos that were sent out by U.S. CENTCOM overnight, showing the ships that were firing off the missiles into Houthi-controlled territory, like the USS Carney pictured here, and we were also able to see the FA-18s that were being launched over the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in bombing missions. They struck 13 different locations in Yemen, which comprised of around 36 targets total. Of course, great to hear that the United States is always working on trying to deal with these bad eggs around the Middle East, but sadly I think this is only the tip of the iceberg and things are going to get a lot more involved from here. We also got to hear that within the area of Syria, apparently Houthi forces, well not Houthi, but IRCG and Hezbollah forces are already beginning to strike back, as reports have been made by the Institute for the Study of War that local Syrian media has claimed that the Islamic resistance in Iraq conducted 4 drone and rocket attacks targeting U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria just today. 3 security sources have told Reuters that there was no attack targeting the Al-Harir air base, but we have still not heard what bases may have actually been attacked. We also did hear that apparently we have a kind of a good indicator of where one of these U.S. bases may have been attacked near the town of Deir ez-Zur, as there were explosions reported near a U.S. base in the area, according to OSINT Defender. And OSINT Defender is a source that we are able to run with very easily, very trustworthy source. But beyond that, we are starting to get an idea that apparently the IRCG was not swayed by the massive air bombing campaign that occurred last night, and they are going to be continuing to try and attack U.S. forces until we go over there and literally destroy the abilities of the IRCG and the Islamic Republic of Iran. Moving on down into the area of Al-Qaim, we also got to hear that apparently explosions were going off here still, and we were able to get a video of that today. We can see them driving by a fire.
خذي نفس عميق خذي نفس لا تقطعي.
We now see them a distance away.
ماما حط الشيء على خشمك.
And watching the secondary explosions.
بابا بس اقعد. الله يخليك. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
أقول لك أنا أطلع ماشي مو أحسن؟ لا غالي. على الشارع الظهر تأذون والله.
حطينا ابويا.
حجي غطى شوفكم هذا كبريت حجي.
ايه عمي. يلا هيا امي.
Now we can see another fast forwarded part of the clip where more secondary explosions are happening pretty much right over their heads.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمد رسول أشهد أن لا إله. هذه أخذ جميلة لا جاية. يلا ماما معلش هسه هناك أهلي. وهاي القشرة هاي.
The video ends there, but showing a little bit of the aftermath of the U.S. strike in the region. Not only that, but we also got to see something really interesting today. Footage was actually released by the U.S. Air Force showing the B-1 Lancers taking off from Dye's Air Force Base in Texas when they went on their great journey across the Atlantic and Northern Europe to the Middle East to conduct their bombing operation. I don't think we ever got to see the landing, but we did get to see the takeoff of one of those B-1 Lancers right here. And here we can see the second B-1 Lancer taking off. So we are able to confirm that our information last night was correct. The aircraft that conducted the bombings were B-1 Lancers from Dye's Air Force Base. They then returned, and of course that was spoken about. OSINT Technical had a good bit about it. But here's one of the pictures that the U.S. Air Force took of one of the B-1 Lancers taking off. And I'm not going to lie, B-1 Lancers look mean every single time you see them. No matter what they're doing, especially with full afterburners going, this thing looks brutal. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news from Dye's Air Force Base, showing our great American B-1 Lancers going across the world to remind the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps why we ought to not be messed with. But sadly, they still don't get the message. So the IDF is now trying to teach Hezbollah that same message. Check it out as the IDF hits Hezbollah forces within southern Lebanon. We can see here a Hezbollah vehicle getting hit by an IDF airstrike dead on and getting knocked out. And the other bit of footage, right over from that, and right here, we also got to see Hezbollah getting hit in a separate location right near the town, and let me make sure I get the name correct, of Bint Jabal. I know I'm getting that wrong, but nevertheless, here's the clip. Well, you see right there, a Hezbollah drone, once again confirming it is a Hezbollah facility, and oh my goodness, there comes the paveway. Well, they're paving the way to some diplomatic relations breaking down. But beyond that, they already have broken down. We can see the remaining Hezbollah guys running out of the building to go find Hezbollah, the little midget. But beyond that, it is nice to see that pretty much a coalition in the area is trying to fight all of the Iranian-backed terrorist groups that are continuing to sow seeds of chaos in the region, and hopefully this will be quelled. But sadly, my honest belief is that this probably will not be quelled, and it probably will go on. But that is all of the Middle East news that we had today, and it's time for us to return back to Ukraine, because President Zelenskyy did have a lot of interesting things to say today that we have not really been able to cover on stream, and I think it'd be better for y'all to hear it from the man himself, the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And so, without further ado, here is the peach. And let me make sure it's not in English. And it is. Ha, I was quick to catch that. And here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Сьогодні ще один день нашої вдячності, нашої поваги до усіх, хто допомагає державі вистояти. Б'ється заради України, перемагає. Відзначив сьогодні воїнів ГУР державними нагородами, саме тих хлопців, які забезпечили черговий успіх для України. Затоплення російського військового корабля в озері Донузлав у нашому Криму. Ефективний вчинок, але і ефективний і надзвичайно корисний. Чим менше в Чорному морі російського флоту, тим більше безпеки і в регіоні, і загалом у світі. Сьогодні продовжив нашу нову традицію шани до усіх героїв України. Вручив сертифікати на квартири воїнам, які відзначені орденом «Золота зірка» та рідним наших героїв. Ще 30 родин воїнів, які боролися проти окупантів і після 2014 року, і у цій війні. Кожна історія, кожного героя заслуговує на те, щоб українці завжди пам'ятали, шанували хоробрість наших воїнів. Окремо я хочу подякувати зараз усім партнерам України, які підтримували і продовжують підтримувати нашу державу. Триває робота із командами європейських держав щодо посилення України, нових оборонних пакетів, нових безпекових рішень. Цього тижня ми маємо нові рішення про підтримку нашої держави від Німеччини, від Нідерландів. Люксембург приєднався до нашої авіаційної коаліції. Литва є новий пакет. З міністром закордонних справ Канади обговорили подальшу оборонну співпрацю. Виконуються оборонні контракти, які для нас критично важливі. Є посилення ППО. Пам'ятаємо, війна розпочата Росією на українському фронті, але її мішенню є не тільки наша держава, не тільки наша незалежність. І тому безумовно важливо зберігати максимальну консолідацію вільного світу і робити усе можливе та неможливе, щоб Україна могла завдати поразок Росії. Іншого Москва не розуміє. Продовжуємо працювати з партнерами і щодо нових санкцій проти Росії, і щодо блокування російських схем обходу санкцій, і максимально активно щодо конфіскації російських активів, які були розсереджені у різних юрисдикціях. Я вдячний усім, хто допомагає нам в роботі щодо конфіскації російських активів. І ще одне. Зараз тривають відновлювальні роботи в деяких регіонах нашої держави, де через російські удари були відключення електрики. Дніпропетровська область, зокрема Кривий Ріг, енергетики працюють, щоб якнайшвидше повернути електрику усім споживачам. Відправили голову Укренерго в регіон, всі необхідні фахівці та ресурси. Прем'єр-міністр Денис Шмигаль сьогодні доповів мені і щодо робіт, і щодо захисту об'єктів енергетики. Я дякую кожній ремонтній бригаді, усім задіяним працівникам. Бути самовідданим на своєму рівні, ефективним, сміливим – це значить для України бути сильною державою, спроможною захищати і захистити себе. Я дякую усім, хто це усвідомлює. Слава кожному українському воїну, слава усім, хто працює, щоб Україна могла захищатись. Слава Україні!
And
Herom Slava. And Slava the green screen.
That's such a jinx. But anyways, we've got to talk a little bit more about the Middle East, by the way, y'all, because that was just a quick little intermission there. There's still a little bit to talk about down here. Because I was speaking about the statements by the Houthis after the attacks that occurred today, saying that they'll meet escalation with escalation. And also, there was a little bit going on up in the north as well, where we've already seen that apparently Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah forces are already starting to attack U.S. forces once more, even after the massive airstrikes that happened yesterday. It seems as though things are starting to heat up a little bit. And Matthew, what do you think?
So after the Houthis absolutely got smashed today, once again by the United States, you would think that they would back down and think, let's think twice before we keep going deeper and get ourselves all killed. But no, that is not what they thought. And in fact, they doubled down and said, we're going to fight fire with fire. And while we crawl around, injured and suffering, we're going to keep fighting anyway. And it looks like a majority of you believe that they will still keep going and they're actually going to follow through on their word. And only a very, very, very small percentage of people believe that the Houthis will actually stop now that they've been smashed for the 4th or 5th time now. Or maybe even more than that. I really can't keep count anymore. But in my opinion, they're not going to stop. They're not thinking logically. They're being driven by an extreme ideology. And when people are motivated by things like that, they don't tend to use logic. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I think they are going to keep going. I think that's very clear at this point, especially after the devastating strikes they endured last night, and they're still trying to attack the world pretty much at large today in any way they can. I think that is certainly showing that they will be trying to conduct more attacks in every single way they can imagine going forward, and we are going to have to continue to ramp up our responses each time. And so with that, I hope that does address that, at least in my opinion. But we have so much to talk about. We have all of y'all's questions. We weren't able to answer many of them during the news tonight, but I hope all of y'all are ready, because we're going to be getting to all of them right now. And so, Matthew, what do we have?
And right up, we have a $33 donation from Hal Rose, who's a longtime channel legend. He says, Enforcer Matt, good call or bad call? There was a reason for making it. And the good of my understanding does not pick sides. Time will tell. And pick a question, please.
And thank you for the support, Hal Rose, and helping this channel to keep on running. And there is always a reason to making a call. That is something I cannot disagree with, Hal Rose. But whether it's a good call or a bad call is something that I've got to say, this seems to me to be a bad call. Like, it's maybe, it's I don't know, maybe it has a good reason, but at least on the surface, there has not been a good explanation as to why he's being removed. Some people have been bringing up, and apparently maybe bringing it up because I brought it up or you all know about it, about how Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States during the U.S. Civil War, went through multiple chief of the armed forces folks, or really generals of the army, until he finally found one that he was happy with. But at the same time, you do have to remember that this was happening in the Civil War because of a massive amount of public pressure, and also because these commanders were clearly incompetent. The Union in the Civil War could have easily defeated the Confederate States of America if it had proper aggressive commanders from the very outset. That's something that we didn't see because continuously, much like McClellan or General Ambrose Burnside, all of the generals that were picked to be generals of the Army always ended up being pretty damn bad at their job until we finally got around towards the end with Ulysses S. Grant. He was a very good general, but up until then, all of them were clearly terrible, and even the public knew how bad they were. Papers in the U.S. Civil War were demanding for the dismissal of General McClellan due to his incompetence and his slowness and caution in reacting to Confederate forces. And it was like that with every single general that Lincoln replaced. It wasn't him replacing him just out of the blue to get a new fresh air in the room. It was because these guys just sucked at their job, like in every single way. There wasn't even really a redeeming quality to many of them. But with Zaluzhnyi, however, and with many other wars, you will see that the commander picked is the commander that stays. Let me ask this. Who in the world, how many different generals of the Army did the Continental Congress select during the American Revolutionary War? One. It was George Washington, and he was the guy who was the general of the army from the very beginning of the Revolutionary War until the very end in 1783. How many Supreme Allied commanders did we have in World War II? Two. one for each campaign, or really one for each theater. The Pacific theater and the European theater. There was Dwight D. Eisenhower, and then there was Douglas MacArthur for the Pacific. Neither of them were replaced. Neither of them were a second option. Douglas MacArthur was the Allied commander of the Pacific theater from the very beginning till the end. Eisenhower was the exact same in Europe. In World War I, it was a very similar story. General Pershing was the AEF's commander from its very inception to the very end of German occupation in 1919 and 1920. Whenever you look through most wars, it's very rare to see that commanders and generals are replaced for a fresh and new mindset. But actually, really quickly, I'm actually going to have to counter that completely with something we've actually said on this channel before. Whenever we've seen Putin take a general and fire him from his position and replace him with a new one, we go, oh shit, look at that. The Russians are doing so bad. This guy sucks so much. He's getting removed and replaced with a new one because anyone could do better than him. That is what we have literally said every single time a Russian chief of the armed forces, or really a general in charge of the Ukraine war, has been replaced. That has been the statement. They suck. Therefore, they're being replaced because the Russians are not getting the results they're looking for. That has been the statement every single time. So it's kind of weird to say that as a metric, that generals get replaced in the U.S. Civil War and in the Russian, in the war in Ukraine, because they suck, both by the Russians and by the Union, in the Civil War. And then when Ukraine does it, then we're going to say, yes, it's only for a new line of thinking. No, I think that for some reason, Zaluzhnyi is pretty much being criticized personally for the failures in the Southern Front, and that's why he's being replaced, which I think is not a good idea. The defeat of the Ukrainian offensive in the Zaporizhia direction is not something that requires the removal of Zaluzhnyi. He has not really two. He has three entire major campaigns under his belt: the Balaklia offensive, the Kherson offensive, and the defense of Kyiv and Kharkiv, which were a part of one major grand defensive campaign in the north. Those are things you cannot sit there and just belittle to nothing because of the Zaporizhia offensive. It does not make any sense in my head. Maybe there's something that we have not been told about Hal Rose, but me personally, I just don't really see why Zaluzhnyi should be replaced. And I'm all for replacing people who are incompetent or corrupt all the time. I feel like we ought to be doing that very often here in the United States, because we should always be striving to be as least corrupt and as competent as possible. But with Zaluzhnyi, as far as his public record has gone, that we have seen on this channel for 2 years, and I have done this as a living for 2 years, and have lived and breathed the war, so I know everything that Zaluzhnyi has done. I have not seen anything publicly that would require Zaluzhnyi to be fired and replaced as Chief of the Armed Forces. Absolutely nothing. Even if you want to try and count the Zaporizhia offensive against him, okay, no general has won every single war or every single battle that they have been a part of in history. There has always been a defeat under every general's belt at some battle, one place or another. That's not something that requires their removal. If there's a string of defeats, then that requires removal. But one of them, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, Hal Rose, the position I'm coming from, because while I don't want to pick sides, just on the aspect of the decision alone, I don't really agree with the decision to remove him from what we know. And I know many people are going to say, well, we don't know everything. Well, we always don't know everything. Not even Zelenskyy or Zaluzhnyi knows everything, being in the positions they are. But based off of what I believe seems to be common sense to me, it's a bad move to remove him. Not because of any political fallout in Ukraine, it's because he's a good commander. He's a great commander from what we can tell, and so removing him would be just a bad idea. But that's my take. I'm pretty vehement on that because I have a great deal of respect for Valery Zaluzhnyi. He's done a very good job. He's really Ukraine's saving grace. I mean, if it wasn't for Zaluzhnyi, I don't know if the Battle of Kyiv and Kharkiv would have even been won at the beginning of the war for us to be talking about this 2 years later. So I hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And let's get a live chat.
All right, and the live chat question is going to go to Greg the Troublemaker, who says, what do you think, Matt? Would the A-10 be viable for Ukraine's protection? And in my opinion, I would honestly say that with the A-10 being slated for retirement here in the United States, With Ukraine asking for them, I would say at least give them a couple of them. I know there are some logistical things that have to be worked out. There's also maintenance for those aircraft and also specific training for the pilots. But if we're going to give them F-16s and we're retiring the A-10, why don't we send a couple of those over as well? I know that's a little bit easier said than done, but if they're asking for it, just give it to them. I mean, they're fighting a war, and I know the United States has said before, we don't want to put them in an aircraft that they're really not ready to fly. It's dangerous. Well, guess what? War is dangerous, and the Ukrainians think that that jet or that aircraft is going to help them win. So if they think that, let them have it. I don't see anything wrong with it, and they should really start listening and answering Ukraine's requests a little bit more seriously. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say if the Ukrainians want the A-10 and we are retiring them, there shouldn't be any harm in really giving them, in my opinion. But that's just me. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Matthew really covered all the points I was going to cover, so I was like, you're really the same thing. But before I move on, I see some people, because I've got to make sure to address this because maybe y'all aren't seeing my side. Or, you know, maybe I'm miscommunicating it badly. Some people are going, well, wasn't MacArthur dismissed in the Korean War? Yes, he was, and it wasn't a good look. He was dismissed because he said he wanted to nuke the Yalu River with 50 nukes and create a radioactive hellscape that no one could cross without dying. That was pretty crazy, so he got removed, and it wasn't a good look. It's not like, oh, we just need a new line of thinking here. Truman went, you're batshit insane. I'm not having you in charge of U.S. forces in Korea. You're removed. So that's what happened. It was not a good look. And I see a lot of people saying, well, you can't, you know, like, you can't disagree with Zelenskyy. Yeah, I can. I mean, like, you can still support Ukraine and be behind the Ukrainian government and Zelenskyy, but disagree with their decisions. This isn't Russia, y'all. We're not trying to be yes men to everything that Ukraine or Zelenskyy chooses to do. If we're doing that, then we're just Russians. We're just literally Russians of a different color, pretty much. It would make no sense to be like that. There is room to disagree with folks like Zelenskyy and decisions they make, and very rarely, I don't think we've actually ever really done that, except for on the Polish grain situation on this channel. We have never really disagreed with anything he's done. But this is one of those things where I go, this is something that doesn't really seem right to be done on the public sphere. And you know something, I'm going to say this. Some people say, I don't know everything. And y'all are right. Maybe I don't know everything. But maybe, I don't know, the public would be helped out with understanding the logic of removing Valery Zaluzhnyi if the Ukrainian government actually gave a good reason why he was being dismissed from his position. I don't know, maybe that would help. Because right now with the information we have, it makes no sense to remove him. So if there's something in the background that we don't know about that would change our decision making on that completely, maybe instead of us just having to go, well, you know, they know what's best, maybe it'd be nice to tell the public why he's actually being removed. Because to me, it still doesn't really make a lot of sense.
And so it's better to get the jump on that. If there is some alternative explanation for why he'd be dismissed, say it now, because if you wait, then dismiss him, and then you come out and say he was corrupt and he was stealing money or something like that, then it starts looking like you fabricated the story to come up with a justified reason for getting rid of him. It's better to go ahead and say it now if that's the case instead of keeping a secret, because I'm sure the conspiracy theories are going to be running absolutely rampant after he actually gets dismissed, if it does actually happen the way it's been reported.
And let's see. Someone said, where is the official news that Zaluzhnyi is dismissed? Only fake news from Nexta and Kyiv Post. Well, considering that Kyiv Post is the second largest newspaper in Ukraine, I'd have a pretty hard time thinking that they're pushing fake news. And also, that would just be a little bizarre. You know, that would be like, I don't know, the New York Times saying, the President of the United States has been shot and killed, you know, for no reason at all. That would be a little weird. So, got to be honest with you there, you can't really say they're fake news because it's not like the Kyiv Post is like Moscow Times or something. They're literally a Ukrainian newspaper. So, got to be entirely honest, y'all. We have heard that the official notice has been given to the U.S. government today, and that doesn't really sound that good. This has also been something that we've been hearing about for days. So, you know, it's not like it's just, you know, some random thing that came up and it's just, you know, theory. It's actually happening. It's going to be happening. And on top of that, it's not like this has not happened before. We have seen Oleksiy Reznikov get removed from his position and replaced as well. And I don't even think we really had a good explanation as to why that happened. That literally just happened one day, and we had no idea. And some people are saying that this is a political deal and we can't get involved in politics. No, this is not a political deal. This is an armed forces deal. While there is Zelenskyy involved, who is a member of a political party in Ukraine, these are his interactions with the armed forces of Ukraine, which is an apolitical organization. The armed forces never takes a political stance. It just exists as an apparatus of the central government. And so the fact that he's doing these things is something that we can weigh in on because it deals directly with the strategic implications of the front lines in Ukraine because it's directly affecting the armed forces of Ukraine. Just to clear all that out, because I see some people trying to apparently write new rules about what we can and can't talk about in the chat, which I respect that, but at the same time, this is not a political issue, this is a military issue. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ari Sweeney, who puts in a $20 donation and says, testing. And Ari, it is working. Thank you very much for that support. And also, Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much, Ari, for testing and helping the channel to keep on running. Folks like you make it possible for us to be here day in and day out, night after night, day after day. And I got to thank you for that. And I got to thank you for testing as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a 20 from Charles Hazlitt, who says, take a question from the chat. And thank you very much, Charles, for that support as well in helping to keep us running, because it does help us keep the debates lively and also the news newsing. So the question from the chat goes to First Person News, who says, how many oil sites have been hit so far in Russia?
Wait a minute, reread that one again?
They said, how many oil sites have been hit so far in Russia?
From what we understand, it's at least 15 at the moment. But sadly, we don't have an exact number because no one's compiled it yet, and I haven't compiled it either, although we have documented all of them. But I do know that it is more than 15 at least. And so with that, thank you for the support, and thank you for letting me answer an interesting question. I hope that gives like a general ballpark answer, but once again, we don't have an exact number right now. But with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And Murray Peacock puts in a 20 up next and says, it seems to work. And message from the chat, please, gentlemen. And Murray, it is working. So you and Ari had a successful test. And thank you both very much for the support. And we shall grab a question from the live chat once again. And this one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who says, will the dragon's teeth of this war last as long as the World War II ones lasted?
They should, because these are made out of concrete and rebar, a lot like the First and Second World War dragon's teeth were made out of. So, hypothetically, they should exist that long if they're never pulled up out of the ground. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much for asking a really interesting question, Margaret, and thank you, Murray, for supporting that, that live chat, and also, thank you for throwing in your third super chat in the history of this channel. Folks like you who support the channel make this thing possible and help us to make this stream a reality each and every night. And we have to thank folks like you. The reason why, and as the stream went on, it's become very clear that super chats are not, you know, barred. People are not barred from putting in super chats at all, is because during the 10-minute countdown, there were two people who were literally screaming in the live chat that we had banned them, although we could physically see them. And they said that they weren't able to throw in super chats or anything. And we were like, huh? We were like, when it was just one person, we're like, that's probably just a technical issue on their end. But then a second person joined in, we're like, wait a minute, can no one throw in a super chat? Because then it became a question. And it appears that for some reason, people are yelling about something that isn't the case, which I don't know why. But you know, all I can say is reset your computer, turn off YouTube, turn it back on, see if that works, or go to the Patreon link in the description below if you want to support the channel. But beyond that, there's no fix that we can give, because we saw both of y'all in the live chat. I responded to both of y'all, and then even after one of y'all said, was I blocked or banned? And I said, I literally replied to you and said, no, you're not, I could see you. Then you continued to scream in all caps in the chat, why am I banned? Why can no one see me? When we all were responding. So with that, I hope that does address why we said that there may not be a chance for super chats to come in, because we thought that was the case at the beginning of the stream. But still, thank you once again, and we will get a live chat, I believe.
Yes,
oh, wait, we already got one. Oh, sorry, we already got one. Remember, I actually circled back after that. Yeah, sorry. I'm off my rocker. What happened? But anyways, thank you so much once again. We are on to the next one.
In our next super chat goes to Marcia Tucker, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you, Marcia, also very much for the support.
Hey!
And she says, a donation for your coffee fund in honor of my 71st birthday tomorrow. And also, happy birthday to you, Marcia. Happy early birthday. I'm sure you'll be here tomorrow, and we'll also wish you a happy birthday then as well. And she said, whoa, hard to believe. And check out the DW documentary on the history of Gazprom and Putin's involvement. It's absolutely crazy. And take a live chat question, please.
And I will make sure to check out a history of Gazprom and Putin's involvement. Putin's involvement in a lot of the heavy industries of Russia is severe. And what's really interesting is that while the Russian Federation, quote unquote, capitalized after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Russian government is still very involved, really tied in completely to the heavy industries of the Russian Federation, which is a very socialist thing. And you can go back through history and you can always see that whenever socialists come into power in a country, the first thing that they always take control of directly is heavy industries like oil, steel, stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting to see that while Russia is quote unquote a capitalist economy these days, they still have a lot of socialist, almost Soviet-like economic controls inside of their country, like the heavy involvement of Putin into a lot of the heavy industries like Gazprom or really the oil industry. But beyond that, happy 71st birthday to you tomorrow, Marcia Tucker. I hope you have an amazing 71st birthday. That is so cool to know that hopefully you'll be here tomorrow during the Sunday night fundraiser as you celebrate your 71st birthday. And I hope it's an amazing one and an incredible one. And thank you so much for putting a donation into the coffee fund, so that way we will be up and at it tomorrow while you are celebrating your 71st birthday. And crazy to believe, right? That means that when you started watching this channel, you were 69 years old. Nice. And that is really crazy to think that so much time has passed, that years, multiple birthdays have passed for folks, and the stream is still running. But still, with that, thank you so much once again for support. I will make sure to check out that DW documentary, and we will get one from the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
In the one from the chat goes to Tony Stankard, who says, whatever happened in Belgorod? And I'm assuming the Russians took it back. Is that true?
Yes, the Freedom of Russia Legion withdrew from the area around Shebekino a good while ago, actually, and the Russians took it back. Since then, we don't know what happened at Shebekino, but we've never really seen a major border operation like that again from the Freedom of Russia Legion. It's always been smaller border attacks now, and I don't ever think we're going to see something like that done again. That was impressive, though, because I remember the Freedom of Russia Legion actually made it all the way up to Maslova, Preston, before we stopped hearing about what was going on there. But that was a wild event. There was literally a part of Russia that was being held by a warring faction against the government, and it held for at least 3 weeks from what we know. But we never really got the conclusion clear enough to tell y'all when that ended. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for support and making this channel possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20 super chat from Jason Carpenter. He says, hi guys, it's a great show as always. And thank you, Jason. He says, I can't help but think that Putin has asked his little Iranian buddy to take some heat off of him. And also, I love how the Ukrainian forces are going after the Russians' resources and still killing it, bro. You're killing it.
And thank you, Jason Carpenter, for saying, we're killing it, Jerry, killing it. And of course, thank you for being a legend as well, supporting this channel and helping it to keep running. But I would say maybe that is possible. Now, the Chinese, whenever anyone tries to say that Iran is involved with China, I find that to be a little bit of a stretch. But with the Russians and the Iranians, that's not that much of a stretch. Because we do have to remember that Iran, well, the Islamic Republic of Iran, was actually backed up a good bit after it came into existence by the Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation later on. So it's not entirely out of the question at all to say that Iran may actually be trying to ramp up tensions in the Middle East to a near breaking point to try and draw attention off of the Ukraine war. Apparently, it may be working because while the United States is incredibly tied up on providing Ukraine with support, apparently we're going to be voting on this next week a $17.6 billion support package for Israel, which, while I have to say Israel is on our side and, of course, is an ally in this entire conflict going on in this region, it makes absolutely no sense to give the Israelis $17.6 billion. Out of the two countries, Ukraine obviously would need it a lot more. Israel has things well in hand with the funding that they provide themselves, and their armed forces, of course, are some of the best in the world by their quality. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to give them $17.6 billion, but who am I? Who am I? I'm only a YouTuber. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And I also love to see how the Ukrainians are going after Russian resources, especially oil. Oil is one of the most important because without oil, really everything else comes to a grinding halt in Russia. And so it is wonderful to see. And the Ukrainians really are starting to think on a grand strategy level. Once again, not to try and hit this home tonight, but thanks to folks like Valery Zaluzhnyi, who is the chief of the armed forces, and under his command, the armed forces are starting to think in these very broad, out-of-the-box ideas that are starting to actually show some promise and results. But with that, hope that does address that quite well. And thank you once again. Let's see. With that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ari Sweeney yet again, who puts in the 20 once more and says, great news channel with a sense of humor on the side. And live chat, please.
And thank you so much, Ari Sweeney, for saying it's a great news channel with a sense of humor. And I like how you spelled humor. You spelled it with the O-U, like a proper Briton would spell it. Here in America, we just spell it H-O-M-U-R, which seems less sophisticated, but it is America. But nevertheless, thank you so much for enjoying it, Ari Sweeney, Kiwi Wife, and Finn, of course, because folks like you help to make this thing possible and help me to be able to keep this news running and also to have a sense of humor while doing it. And so thank you once again, and we will get a live chat. What do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question this time goes to Rad Doctor, who says, what will be the limiting reagent of the Russian military on the Russian losses list? And people, tanks, or special equipment, question mark.
It probably will be tanks. Tanks are an offensive weapon. And some people are going to be like, what? What do you mean? It can be defensive too. No. It is solely an offensive weapon. The original design of a tank was for breakthrough. That is what tanks are designed to do, is to try and conduct a breakthrough of enemy lines. So going off of that, the loss of tanks, and if the Russians pretty much run out of tanks at some point, no matter how much infantry they have, they will never be able to conduct an offensive battle beyond that point at all. Even with any chance of a minor defeat, it would always be a major defeat beyond that point because they wouldn't have the adequate support. So going off of that, if they run out of tanks, the war's pretty much over for them. If they run out of soldiers, by default, the war is over. But as far as anything else goes, really the first thing that would break would be the tank support, because they are running out of tanks. There is a finite number. And wait a minute, did I spell humor wrong? Oh my god, yeah. I did. Oh my god. I'm so sorry, y'all. Now I
put in some example spellings so that way you can get a gist.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry, y'all. I misspelled humor live on air. I sound like an idiot now, a proper right idiot. And
I used to win spelling bees, actually, so,
Man.
Did you win any spelling bees in Forster?
You gonna flex on me now? That's what you gonna flex on me?
I'm flexing the old elementary school spelling bee trophies, man. I'm coming out tough tonight.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Look, you fool me once, you can't fool me again. But anyways, with that, so sorry everyone for misspelling that. I just realized that, and now I feel like an idiot. But thank y'all for correcting that. But with that, we are on to the live chat from Ari Sweeney. And so what do we got?
I think we just got it.
Oh, on God?
I think we just did.
Oh, damn. Well, thank you so much once again, Ari Sweeney, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope I addressed that well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a 20 from Snow White, who says, I second what Cliff said. And first off, thank you very much, Snow White, for that support. And let's see what Cliff said down here at the bottom. Cliff put in a 10, by the way, Cliff H. And thank you also, Cliff, for that support. And he said, great to have Enforcer Matt back on the stream. And LSA. And I tell you what, thank you very much, Cliff, for that. And also, thank you very much to Snow White for seconding that. I'm seeing a lot of people even yet tonight. And I can't remember if this is my third or fourth night back ever since I took a little hiatus there for a while for law school purposes. But I'm very glad to be back very much still. And I'm getting back into the swing of things a little bit. It's a little bit tough getting used to that sleep schedule because you wake up and then the next day you feel like you're in an absolute fog. But I'm working the schedule back out and it's working out just right. So I'm able to come back on here at night and not feel completely off and messed up. But thank you both very much for the kind words. And also, like I said, it's good to see y'all as well. And with that being said, we're moving on to our next one, which goes to Marion Deemert, who throws in a 20. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support. And she says, you both made a good decision, and your voices are worth their weight in gold. Dang. And also, wishing you all the best of the best, and Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer, and thank you for the kind words. Our voices are worth its weight in gold. If only our voices had weight, because right now they're worthless, because they have no weight. But beyond that, I do like what you're saying. That is incredibly kind of you. And also, thank you for saying we made a good decision. That's something that I have not actually questioned at all, funnily enough. I withdrew from law school officially this Friday, which was yesterday, and I have never felt more free in my life. Like, literally, I feel as free as I ever have, more free than ever, really. I feel like the weight of the world is off my shoulders now. And also, that's something that actually concerned me a little bit, is how would other people think if I did drop out of law school? And eventually I just got to the point I was like, you know what, this just sucks so much. Who cares what they think? Most, if not none of them, have ever gone to law school, so I can't really care what they think because they don't even know what it's about. It just sucks. It was terrible. And now that we're withdrawn, like, we can talk about it as honestly as possible. And I get it, like law school has an interesting dynamic around it, and you could even get that when we were trying to withdraw, because people who were involved in the legal world, sometimes, it's not everyone, but at least in legal academia, sometimes get these high and mighty perceptions of themselves where they can kind of just dictate to you that you're going to do something, although they have no ability to. And Matthew knows what I'm talking about. And even then, exiting out, you deal with that, and you're like, you see, that is why I don't want to be here, is because things like this are just persistent throughout the entire field. And it's just never ending. So I thank you for saying that we made a good decision, because I certainly think we did, and I would rather be doing this any day of the week than going to law school or doing anything else. I absolutely love doing this. It is my passion. It's Matthew's passion, and now it's got to be, because this is what we're doing now. We are strapped in and doing it for the rest of all time until the war's over, and probably even covering other things beyond the war. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Marion Deemer. I'm wishing you all the best, and Slava Ukraini! And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Siri, who throws in a $15 donation. And thank you very much, Siri, for that support. And they said, imperial system of makes no sense whatsoever. Fahrenheit/feet. And more important things to talk about. And Matt, you have been missed in all caps. I tell you what, I missed y'all as well. And they said, it is so lovely to hear your voice again. And XO from Oslo. And I tell you what, all the way from Oslo, I love Oslo. I'm telling you, I love Oslo. The people are great. Oslo's wonderful. I love Oslo. And we love Siri. We love Siri. But seriously, thank you very much for the kind words as well. Like I said a million times at this point, and I seriously mean it. Every single time I say it, I love to be back. It is great to be back, and I wouldn't be anywhere else. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, the imperial system doesn't make sense, but when you grow up in America, it makes absolute sense. It really does. Metric is the one that doesn't make sense if you're from America. You have to learn your way into it over here. This is not taught to you. But beyond that, Matt has been missed. I'll have to agree. He's certainly been missed, and it is great to hear his voice. And also, hello to Oslo, which we've zoomed into right here. Beautiful city, really cool place. We've looked at it a million times, but still, it is gorgeous through and through. And thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Siri, and thank you for being one of our Norwegian viewers. Happy to see Enforcer Matt back. Long live the Lee Spring Army, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a 15 from Margaret Hemsley, who says, Putin said to Shoigu, did you take all of Herzon? And Shoigu says, for now, only only something. I can't repeat. And it is in Russian, I think, but it means something foul. I do know that word. No. Because I know all the curse words in Russian. And in honor of PsyOps, LOL, Margaret says.
That's why.
That's a wild one for Margaret. That's out there.
Margaret's wild and in the chat. But nevertheless, I know why. It had PsyOps' name attached to it, an absolute legend of the stream. And also, Margaret, you are an absolute legend as well. I gotta thank you for throwing in the joke. Sadly, we couldn't read the whole thing. You got censored tonight like PsyOps would have been. But still, thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running, Margaret. And thank you for throwing in the joke. Because it is funny. I'm getting to read it right here. It is funny, but sadly, we can't read it out loud. But still, with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we've got a 10 from Lance Baker, who says, good to see Matt back. And Matt is back. Matt is back. I was about to do the lyrics to that song, but I forgot all the lyrics right as I was about to do it.
Back again.
There you go. I'll have somebody say it for me because I totally went blank when I thought about the song lyrics. I don't even know who sings it anymore. I forgot all of it. Just flew out of my mind just then. But anyways, thank you very much, Lance, for the kind words as well. And also, it is good to be back. And also, I can't remember what I said on any of that stuff. I was about to do the other joke, but I forgot it too. So scrap that. Thank you very much, Lance. And with that, I'm going to recover and move on from that one. So we're moving on to the next one, which is from Uncle Grandpa.
Wait, we had to get a live chat.
He didn't want one.
Wasn't it Reeps 77?
No, it's Lance Baker.
What the hell? Why in the world was I on that one? I was reading that one, and it, like, my mind is slipping tonight. So sorry. So sorry, everyone. But with that, we are on to the next one. Sorry about that.
And the next one goes to Uncle Grandpa, who puts in a 10 and says, testing to see if the super chat works. And thank you all for what you do for Ukraine.
And thank you so much, Uncle Grandpa, for your 5th super chat ever. And thank you for testing to see if it works. We found out they do work. Thank the Lord. We were getting very worried. And thank you so much for enjoying everything we do for Ukraine. Y'all might actually find this funny, but as y'all may know, there's a group of malicious, mean people out there who dox us and love to try and threaten us with death and all kinds of other stuff. But at this point, we just kind of live with it. But one thing that was funny that happened during Matthew's hiatus that I didn't talk about with anyone because there was no one else to talk to it about. Matthew was, focusing on law school full time. Is that I got an email that was called YouTube channel, and it said, "Hi, YouTube here. We are going to demonetize your channel because one video disagreed with our guidelines. So sorry, but if you want to appeal this, you have 2 days." And I was like, who in the hell thinks I'm falling for this? Like, I was like, this isn't even from YouTube. Like, YouTube has a specific way they email you. And also, everything else goes through the dashboard as well. So if you don't see it in the dashboard, the email is just a lie. And so, it was so stupid to look at. And then they emailed me 2 days later and said, "Hi, YouTube channel, you have been deleted from YouTube and demonetized for not responding to our email." And I was like, "Oh no, that's terrible. Let me go run a live stream tonight." And then I went and ran a live stream. I was like, what the hell are these people trying to get from me? Because they put a link in both of their emails. They were like they said the YouTube channel was deleted and demonetized, but click here on this link because there's still at least some chance that you may get your channel back. I never clicked on either link. I was like, you're out of your, they're out of their minds if they think I'm clicking on any link in an email like that, or any email for that matter. And I was laughing all the way because I actually, for a second, I was like, I don't know, maybe YouTube has someone who can't type. Maybe I'm about to get demonetized, but I'm ignoring it anyways because, that's stupid. So it ended up not being the case. So that's kind of funny. I thought I'd share that since we're talking about testing super chats. But thank you so much once again.
Well, worse than that, you remember when that scam was? They were trying to pull a scam on me. Some of those malicious folks were, and they created like a whole fake email, logo, and website and everything to try to pull this elaborate scam. And they contacted me posing as a lawyer and trying to trick a law student that's literally studying the law, saying, "We're going to sue you for copyright infringement for using Enforcer Media." I was like,
that's a trademark,
okay.
asshole.
Yeah, I'm like, a copyright on the name. I'm like, what do you hold a trademark to the name? And also, where's your company? And they're like, well, we can't tell you that. It's top secret. And it started falling apart as I asked more questions about it. And I said, listen, I'm not going along with a scam. Like, I know this is a scam. It's like, where even is your address, your headquarters, or anything like that? It's in Europe. I said, okay, well, we're in Europe. They said it's top secret.
Dude, it's like who the hell would even be able to sue us for trademark infringement in Europe? Like it's like the trademarks don't even conflict with each other at that point because they're in Europe.
And the funny thing is, it was one of the hot dog man's people doing it.
Yeah.
And they thought they were so clever making a website and everything. They went through all the trouble of buying a domain and all this stuff to set up this elaborate prank just to mess it up when I asked one simple question. It was hilarious.
Oh, man.
And they thought they had us going for a while, but I was playing them for a long time, just like playing the joke out to get a good laugh. I was bored.
Dude.
That was before law school was in, but what were you about to say, Enforcer?
Dude, you know what they thought you were going to do? You know what they thought we were going to do? Is we were going to go, oh my god, not legal action. Quick, change your name. What are we going to change it to? Derp. It's some shit like that. You know what I mean? Oh my god.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, look who's laughing now. That's it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. I'm so sorry when we had to go recount our own stories of almost getting scammed by fools on the internet. But nevertheless,
it's crazy the amount of people that have tried to pull fast ones on us. I don't know why people think that we're literally like born. We're not born yesterday. It's like when people come along and they're like pulling these like elementary school scams and pranks and stuff on us, trying to like pull our chain. And it's like we're not going to fall for that. It's like, you know, we may have like decided law school is not for us, but we do have a little basic knowledge here. It's not like we're starting from scratch. And they come along like they're going to take candy from a baby. They end up getting played, and then they get even more mad that they got played.
Yeah, and then most of them just move on to, I know where you live and I'm gonna kill you. You know, it's like, well, that's not even scary because one,
that's
I know,
a good fallback.
it's like one, I know that you're at least 400 pounds and have not gotten out of your apartment in 3 years, and two, you know, considering that you're a drug user, because by the way, just in case y'all don't know this, you cannot, even if it's legal in your state to possess marijuana, you still can't possess and use marijuana and then own a firearm, because that is still technically illegal under federal law. And and of course you have to be approved by the federal government to be able to own a firearm. And, you know, and then state laws can then add on to restrictions of firearm ownership. But that's why whenever you fill out a form 4473, when you're buying a gun, it asks you, are you a user of narcotics such as marijuana, such like that, and then in parentheses it says in that box, even if it is legal in your state, it is still a federal crime. And so if you answer yes, I recreationally use drugs or whatever, you will not be able to buy a firearm even if it is legal in your state to use recreational drugs of some kind. So that's always something that I always think about when I think about that kind of stuff. It's like, one, I know most of these people have to be some kind of a drug user, so they're probably in some illegal possession of a firearm. They have one anyways, but, you know, not going down like the whole rabbit hole there or anything, but that's always interesting to me. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next, but still, thank you so much once again, Uncle Grandpa, for the support.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from BC Skyman, who says, testing Super Cat. And chat question, please. And the Super Cat is working very well. It came through loud and clear. And thank you very much, BC Skyman, for that support. And the live chat question is going to go to Russell, who says, bizarre question. And he's prefacing it with bizarre, so let's see what we got here. He says, is Zaluzhnyi capable of taking over if something happens to Zelenskyy? And I'm just curious as to why this might have happened.
I don't know why it happened, sadly. That's something I'm in the dark about, because I can't really make it make logical sense. But I don't really think Zaluzhnyi is even in the line of succession. I believe the Ukrainian government finally made a line of succession nearer to the beginning of the war in 2022, but I don't remember what order it was, but I don't think the chief of the armed forces was up near the top. I think it was like the head of the Verkhovna Rada was the next in line or something along that. And then there was another minister in the Verkhovna Rada that would then take the place of president. And then I think it got down into like the minister of defense and then the chief of the armed forces or something like that. So he'd be like fifth down on the list in the line of succession. So I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can, because at least in the line of succession, he's several steps away from being at the top. So it's not like if something happens to Zelenskyy, naturally he's the next one up. It actually would be several other people before he made it there. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much, BC Skyman, for testing out the Super Cat, because Super Cats are super. And so thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Andrea Fed, who puts in a 10. And says, will the Ukrainians begin retreating without Zaluzhnyi's brilliant strategy?
Let's see. Will Ukrainian... No, I don't think so, but I think offensive battles may be a little bit tougher to conduct. Some people say there needs to be a breath of fresh thinking. Listen, you know, Zaluzhnyi is the breath of fresh thinking. I mean, look at that. Look at how drone warfare has evolved over the past 2 years. He's been chief of the armed forces the entire time. He's actually the guy at the very head of things that is spearheading this part of what the Ukrainian armed forces is doing. So, you know, I don't think there should be a breath of fresh air in the chief of the armed forces. We already have it, and it's been doing pretty damn good the way it is. So, you know, that would be my opinion. You know, and I think I'm going to have to die on that hill. I think I will, because I just cannot justify removing him. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be the failure of the Ukrainian armed forces, but I think at some point, people will look back and go, man, I wish General Zaluzhnyi was still in charge, because some things these days are not being managed as great as it was under Zaluzhnyi. That's my opinion. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again, Andrea Fed, for the support, helping this channel to keep on running. It's always great to have a Fed here. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another 10 from Ari Sweeney, as well as a 10 from Kim Ott. And they said, great job every night, and also 10 for the Bot Fly SWAT Fund.
Hey. And thank you so much for the support, Ari Sweeney, and helping the channel to keep running. And thank you for putting in some bot fly SWAT fund. I like that, and it will help us to swat more bots. And I cannot wait. Because the Middle East is going to continue to brew up, and when it gets serious, we're going to be covering that pretty much daily, maybe even as a priority news segment at the beginning of the stream like we did last night. And the Iranian bots are going to be coming in hot, because while we banned a lot of Russian bots to the point it's like a small trickle nightly, the Iranian bots are going to pour in like a river, and it's going to be just like 80 bots banned per night once that becomes a major news segment. It's going to be wild, again, like it used to be at the beginning of the war in Ukraine. But with that, thank you for the support, and thank you for helping us to prepare to mobilize our armed forces to deal with the bot invasion that's going to be happening in the chat. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And the next one goes to Reeps77, who puts in a 10 and says, Enforcer Matt, it's good to have you back. And love to the LSA and Slav Ukraine. And message from the live chat, please. And Reeps, thank you very much. I hate to say it, I feel like I'm a broken record at this point, but it is good to be back. And thank you very much, Reeps, for the support as well. And with that being said, we are grabbing that live chat question in honor of Reeps, and it goes to Hans Herman, who says, why were no AH-6 Little Birds delivered to Ukraine and being completely written off?
I have no idea. Me personally, I like the AH-6 Little Birds. Let me go pull them up here so that way people can get an idea of what I'm talking about. These little fellas. Matthew will know them from GTA 5.
It's a buster.
Yeah, there we go. But these little things used to be the AirCav's recon helicopter until they were replaced by the Kiowa, and I think the Kiowa is now getting replaced by something else. I forgot what the new one is, but beyond that, these things are pretty nice. They're light utility helicopters. They can even be light attack helicopters. These things can be fitted out to carry 4 Hellfires each, and also modified with other kinds of optics and systems and such. But nevertheless, it would at least help out a little bit. And I don't know why they haven't been sent. From what I understand, they're fairly easy to maintain. They're pretty cheap. They're pretty numerous. We're not using them anymore. So we could send them over. But sadly, for some reason, we just didn't want to. So sadly, I can't explain why that didn't happen. But still, I think it should have. It's a good little helicopter. There's no question in my mind. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And thank you, Reep77, for sponsoring that live chat. And I'm so sorry that I got to yours way earlier before we were even at it. For some reason, I got confused and read yours, and I thought that it was, I thought it was Lance Baker's. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from 0J Kwan, who says, keep up the good work, Enforcer, and welcome back to Enforcer Matt. And he says, it's nice to hear both of you as energetic as ever. And what do you foresee the next offensive in Ukraine, Crimea, Kupiansk, or Mariupol? And 0J Kwan, we are so energetic. Once you got law school off your back like we did, yeah, all of a sudden your energy returns back to you. And also that like a cloud that hangs over your head, at least for me, went away. Because when you know something's not for you and you keep trying to go on and, force your way through it, you don't feel too good about the whole situation, then to say the least. And that was basically where I was at. My mind was telling me this is not the way you should be going. I could have made it through law school. I, could have fought my way through it and gotten through the thing. But what's the point? Because when you get out on the other end, are you really wanting to do what you're fighting to, eventually make your way to get toward? And to me, the question was answered with a no, at least for now. So had to call it off, and I'm feeling so much better now that we did. And the Enforcer is too. But Enforcer, what do you say?
And I would say, thank you so much for the support, Zero J Kwan. And it's nice to be energetic again, because I got to tell y'all, I did not realize it until I finally got out. I was actually worn out. It's like literally burned out pretty much daily, and just going through the motions, trying to get through law school and do this. And so when I finally got out, I was like, geez, I have never felt this good in a while, like at least at least, I'm trying to think, like 6-7 months, because I've been exhausted for 6 to 7 months. And thank you so much for enjoying our energy, because I'm very happy to be back to full energy levels. I think the next offensive in Ukraine probably will be in the Kherson area. It will be very tough to pull off, or it will be up in the northeast. Those are the areas I think will probably have the most success, and I think the Ukrainians would probably try and push towards Starobilsk in the northeast. That would be my honest opinion. And in the south, they would probably try and push towards Armyansk if it was possible. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you so much once again for support Zero J Quan and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Matt Cheer, who put in a 5, along with Nyaich, and also George Tincher. And I'm sorry about that, Nyaich. I think I butchered your name on the first one. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, thank you very much to all three of you, Matt, Nyaich, and also George, for that support. And there's no comments to address, but we do appreciate it, of course, very, very much. And we also have a $6 donation from Nyaich, who says he's in charge when recruitment are corrupt, and when his procurement for mortar shells are corrupt, his top officers were corrupt earlier. Fire him.
And I thank you for the support, Nietzsche. And I would say, you can't really blame them. You can't really blame him for that, though, because, I mean, does he know about low-level corruption? Most likely not. Like, you know, the president of the United States is not going to know about the police brutality that happened in Branson, Missouri, or wherever the hell, you know, a police brutality matter is going to occur. That is something so far, in fact, it's not even under the president's authority, because that's a municipal government that operates your local police force. But the president of the United States is not going to know about stuff like that. So should he really be held responsible, or should someone else